Chapter 1408. Bang, bang, bang. As Murong Yu approached the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python, Murong Yu's space shield, space barrier, and reversal of time and space kept exploding. In the end, Murong Yu could only keep using all kinds of space and time power to maintain it. At the same time, he controlled Hichu Luoshu to rush to the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python's lair at a faster speed. However, the faster he was, the closer he was to the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python, the greater the pressure he had to bear. In the end, Murong Yu's attack wasn't even fast enough for it to shatter. The pressure was increasing. Murong Yu's heart sank. If this continued, he might not be able to rush in, unless he used various powerful treasures, such as the yin-yang cauldron. However, in that case, the experts from the Divine Heavens sect would find out. At that time, if they attacked together with the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python, even if there were 10 more Murong Yu, he would not be able to resist. Fight! Thousands of thoughts flashed through Murong Yu's mind. He gritted his teeth and decided to use the yin-yang cauldron and take the risk to rush in. Boom! However, just as Murong Yu was about to take the risk to rush in, an earth-shattering sound came from the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python's lair. A frightening shockwave came crashing down, shattering all of the defensive measures Murong Yu had placed on the He-Tu and Luoshu. At the same time, Murong Yu spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. And Hichu Luoshu was also sent flying, far away from the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python. Murong Yu's hard work was in vain. The power of life rushed in crazily, and Murong Yu's injuries were immediately healed. Murong Yu couldn't be bothered to check his own injuries as he hurriedly looked ahead. The originally calm lower body of the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python seemed to have been stabbed by a knife at this moment as it violently writhed. An incomparably terrifying aura erupted, tearing the heavens and splitting the earth. Aside from the iron-boned, steel-scaled python's energy fluctuations, Murong Yu also sensed another extremely powerful aura. His aura was almost the same as that of the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python, and much stronger than the many ancestral saints of the Divine Heavens sect who were fighting against the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python. Could it be the ancestor saint of the Divine Heavens sect? Murong Yu's heart sank. It was obvious that someone was fighting with the tail of the python in its nest. While Murong Yu was looking in that direction, the lower half of the python's body swayed even more vigorously, and its aura became more and more terrifying. Could it be that the Tianyuan fruit has been taken by them? Murong Yu's heart sank even more. Before his voice died away, a streamer had already shot up to the sky from the python's nest and rapidly shot into the distance. Murong Yu looked over and saw that it was a gray-robed elder. But at this moment, his clothes were torn and he looked embarrassed. His body was covered in blood, and even blood was spurting out. Boom! At the same time that the gray-robed elder shot up to the sky, the lower body of the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python also rushed out of the nest and quickly strangled the gray-robed elder. Seeing this scene, Murong Yu's heart sank completely. Could it be that the super expert of the Divine Heavens sect had already stolen the Tianyuan fruit? Otherwise, he wouldn't have left here. Of course, there was another possibility, that the gray-robed elder didn't steal the Tianyuan fruit. He was discovered when he sneaked in, and then the two sides fought. In the end, the gray-robed elder couldn't defeat the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python and quickly escaped. Before seeing it with his own eyes, Murong Yu wouldn't leave. Unless he was sure that the Tianyuan fruit had been stolen, he wouldn't leave. Therefore, he once again flew towards the nest of the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python. Because the tail of the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python had already chased after the gray-robed elder and left the nest far away. Therefore, Murong Yu didn't feel any pressure and easily entered the nest of the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python. The lower half of the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python has been taken away by me. Hurry up and get the Tianyuan fruit from its nest. Just as Murong Yu entered the nest of the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python, The experts of the Divine Heavens sect who were watching from afar received a message from the gray-robed elder. Those Saint Kings were overjoyed. In a flash, they all turned into streamers and bypassed the battlefield, flying towards the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python. What a strong fragrance! After Murong Yu entered the nest of the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python, he came out of the Hichu Luo Shu. Originally, he thought that the nest would definitely be extremely smelly, and he was prepared to not breathe here. However, after he appeared, he smelled a strange fragrance that assailed his nostrils. It was strong, but not greasy. When he smelled it, he even had the illusion that his pores were all opened, his mind was relaxed, and his strength had increased. Could it be that the Tianyuan fruit hasn't been stolen? Murong Yu was shocked. He immediately sped up and rushed towards the depths of the nest. At this moment, those Saint Kings of the Divine Heavens sect had already rushed to the entrance of the nest. They turned into streamers and rushed in. The nest of the iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python was extremely deep, but it was also very big. Therefore, Murong Yu rushed in without any obstruction. As Murong Yu went deeper, the strange fragrance became stronger and stronger. After a few breaths, the front of Murong Yu suddenly opened up. The original layer was bare in all directions, as smooth as a mirror. Not to mention trees, there wasn't even a weed or moss. However, now Murong Yu seemed to have entered a primeval forest. The towering trees were lush and green. There were all kinds of grass and trees that were full of greenery. Murong Yu's gaze swept through the greenery and finally stopped on a fruit that was the size of a fist and shone with a black halo. The strange fragrance that Murong Yu smelled came from this fruit. Tianyuan fruit. Murong Yu's eyes shone brightly as he exclaimed. Although he didn't know about the Tianyuan fruit before, the young master of the Divine Heavens sect had this item in his memory. Therefore, he recognized it at a glance. Murong Yu walked up quickly and approached the Tianyuan fruit. Next to the Tianyuan fruit, Murong Yu even felt like he was floating in the air. The Tianyuan fruit is completely black and shines with a faint halo. It means that it is completely ripe and can be picked. Murong Yu recited the aura that he got from the young master of the Divine Heavens sect. This kind of heavenly fruit is rare. I wonder if it will still grow if it is transplanted to Hichu Luoshu? Murong Yu pondered. Although there were many heavenly fruits that had been transplanted to Hichu Luoshu, they were useless. If the level was too low, even if it grew fruit, it could only be eaten as a fruit. However, the Tianyuan fruit was different. As long as one was a sage, it would be effective, unless one had surpassed the honorable realm. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Just as Murong Yu was hesitating about whether to transplant the Tianyuan fruit tree to Hichu Luoshu, a gust of wind came from behind. When Murong Yu turned his head to take a look, his expression immediately changed. The Sage Kings of the Divine Heavens sect had charged in. Murong Yu had no time to hesitate. He reached out his hand and was about to grab the Tianyuan fruit. "You're courting death." The Sage Kings were shocked when they saw this. They were furious and had already attacked with their strongest attacks. In an instant, an incomparably violent attack blasted towards Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu's reaction was not slow. In less than 1/10 of an instant, he had already grabbed the Tianyuan fruit. However, just as he was about to pluck the Tianyuan fruit, a force burst out from the Tianyuan fruit and sucked Murong Yu's arm. Murong Yu was shocked. If he was sucked in, he would definitely die. Therefore, he did not hesitate. A chaotic force gushed out and rushed toward the Tianyuan fruit. Although the Tianyuan fruit was extremely precious, and even the ancestor sages would go crazy for it. However, it was not as precious as his life. Therefore, Murong Yu decisively gave up the Tianyuan fruit. However, just as Murong Yu's chaotic force came into contact with the Tianyuan fruit, the suction force from the Tianyuan fruit disappeared. Without the suction force and danger, Murong Yu was naturally unwilling to give up the Tianyuan fruit. Thus, with a single thought, Murong Yu plucked the heavenly origin fruit from the tree. At the same time, the attacks of the Sage Kings had already blasted above Murong Yu's head. They carried a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth as they slammed down. If Morongyu was hit by these forces, his physical body would shatter and his soul would be annihilated. Space power, time power, soul attack. Morongyu held the Tianyuan fruit tightly in his right hand. With a thought, he was about to enter the Hichu Luoshu. At the same time, he used various techniques, either to protect himself or to attack the saint rulers. The sage kings were furious. The Tianyuan fruit already belonged to the divine heavens sect. Now, Morongyu was trying to snatch it from them? How could they not be angry? Therefore, their attacks were the most powerful. Morongyu's heart sank to the bottom. He knew that all his techniques would not be able to block the attacks of the Sage Kings. At the same time, he could not enter the Hichu Luoshu before their attacks hit him. Moreover, these people had destroyed the void and made the space unstable. If he entered the Hichu Luoshu, he might charge into the turbulent space. With a thought, a cold smile flashed across Morongyu's face. The hand that was holding the Tianyuan fruit suddenly moved forward and faced the attacks of the Sage Kings. The Saint Kings were shocked and immediately retracted their attacks. Just as they retracted their attacks, an aura that could destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth, causing even their souls to tremble, came from outside the nest at lightning speed and with the force of a thunderbolt. The iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python was back. Everyone's expression changed. Chapter 1409. Rumble. A terrifying aura surged into the sky. Before the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python even got close, the terrifying aura had already shaken its lair. The walls on both sides were shattered, and the momentum was terrifying. In the blink of an eye, everyone, including Morongyu, felt as if they were facing the end of the world. The strong aura of death suppressed their hearts. Everyone was shocked. They all knew that even the ancestor saints of the divine heavens sect were suppressed by the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python, let alone them. They couldn't even block one move before they were killed by the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python. Run. Everyone retreated instantly. However, they all knew that there was only one exit to the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python's lair. Now that the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python had returned, it had blocked their way out. If there was no miracle, they would definitely die in the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python's lair. However, they didn't want to die, so they quickly retreated. As for Morongyu, the Saint Kings of the Divine Heavens sect didn't bother with him. After all, they were about to die. What was the use of the Tianyuan fruit? Morongyu's reaction was the fastest, because he was already retreating. After forcing everyone to retreat, he had already smashed through the void and directly traveled through space, shooting toward the depths of the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python. However, he still didn't dare to enter the Hichu Luoshu, because the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python was too strong. Wherever its power passed, the void would shatter. Morongyu didn't dare to rush into the turbulent space. The power of space. The power of time. Morongyu used all his escape methods and retreated quickly. And in the process, bang, a Saint King couldn't dodge in time and was directly whipped to death by the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python's tail. Even his soul was shattered into dust. He couldn't be more dead. Although the Saint King was fast, the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python was faster. Even the ancestor saints couldn't suppress it, let alone the Saint Kings. Seeing this, Morongyu and the rest felt the death aura in their hearts became stronger. Morongyu had already taken out the Hichu Luoshu and the Yin-Yang Cauldron to protect himself, and quickly. However, Morongyu's speed wasn't even comparable to his saint rulers, so he definitely wasn't a match for the iron-boned, steel-scaled, hypervenom python. Therefore, the iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python. The iron-boned, steel-scaled, venomous python's tail. The venomous python, if it weren't for the Saint Kings of the Divine Heavens sect, he would have returned to the true martial temple long ago. The purple radiance, heavenly, Civ Pagoda. Morongyu's mind suddenly lit up as he thought of the broken supreme artifact. The supreme weapon's power was incomparably strong, and it should be able to temporarily offset the attack of the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python. Even if it was only for a moment, Murong, you could enter Hichu Luo Shu. Purple light, heavenly, Civ Pagoda. He was a man of his word. With a thought from Murong Yu, the purple light, heavenly Civ Pagoda turned into a purple light and shot out from between his eyebrows. Then, it rapidly expanded with the wind, rapidly expanding to the size of a millstone, circling above Murong Yu's head. With a thought, the power in Murong Yu's body surged like a raging wave. Then, like a torrent, it tore through the void and poured into the heavenly purple pagoda. Rumble, the purple light, heavenly, sifting pagoda shook violently and then burst out with a dazzling five-colored light. At the same time, the might of a supreme being burst out like a torrential river, sweeping in all directions. At this moment, the Saint Kings of the Divine Heavens sect, including the extremely powerful iron-boned, steel-scaled venomous python, were all shocked. That was the deterrence of a superior to a subordinate. At this moment, there was only one thought in their minds: to submit. They submitted to this incomparably vast and powerful pressure. His heart and soul were shaken. Their bodies began to soften involuntarily, and they were about to fall to their knees. In particular, the fleeing saint rulers all dropped to their knees with a plop. They did not hesitate at all. Actually, it wasn't that they wanted to kneel. However, their minds could no longer control their bodies. His physical body had already submitted. Even the incomparably powerful iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python hesitated for a moment. It was this moment of hesitation that caused their attacks to stop. Murong Yu seized this opportunity and rushed into Hichu Luo Shu. The purple light, heavenly, sifting pagoda also smashed through the void at the moment Murong Yu disappeared. It turned into a purple stream of light and followed closely behind Murong Yu into Hichu Luo Shu. The moment Murong Yu entered Hichu Luo Shu, the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python had already reacted. After all, the purple light, heavenly sifting pagoda only had the might of a supreme being, but it didn't have the corresponding ability. After it reacted, its gigantic snake tail smashed through the void with a swoosh and slammed into Hichu Luo Shu, who was about to be teleported away. Rumble. Hichu Luo Shu was immediately hit, smashed through the void, and flew far away. Murong Yu, who was in Hichu Luo Shu, was instantly smashed into pieces and turned into a bloody mist, spraying blood all over the sky. His mind was once again smashed into pieces, and his soul was also torn into several pieces. The tearing pain almost caused Murong Yu to faint instantly. However, Murong Yu's willpower was extremely strong. He endured the boundless pain and used the power of space and time to attach to Hichu Luo Shu, especially the power of time. It even sent Hichu Luo Shu into a different space-time. He temporarily avoided the pursuit of the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python. After entering the different space-time, the surrounding void had already stabilized. Then, Murong Yu activated the teleportation function of Hichu Luo Shu and teleported away from the nest of the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python. Roar! After Murong Yu left, the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python had already discovered him. Therefore, after an earth-shattering sound, the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python quickly unleashed its power. Therefore, the holy kings of the Divine Heavens sect were met with tragedy. In just a moment, they had already been shattered into pieces. They couldn't be any more dead. At this point, the holy kings of the Divine Heavens sect who had entered the fearsome Beast Mountain range had all been annihilated. Boom, boom, boom. After killing these holy kings, the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python still couldn't vent its anger from the theft of the Tianyuan fruit. It continued to go on a rampage, emitting waves of even more powerful aura. While the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python was raging, several extremely violent auras either shot out from the fearsome Beast Mountain range or from outside the mountain range. They were either demonic beasts, human holy kings, or even holy kings from other clans. However, they all had one thing in common. They were powerful, extremely powerful. The aura that erupted from their bodies was far more powerful than the ancestor saints of the Divine Heavens sect, and even the ancestor Saint Peak expert. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. These experts emitting extremely powerful auras were extremely fast and appeared above the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python in an instant. The supreme weapon was emitted from the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python's nest. Let's go down and take a look. The first expert who came here whispered, then took a step forward and flew straight to the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python's nest. Roar! The iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python was already extremely angry. Now that it saw someone rushing over, it was immediately enraged and unleashed its strongest attack to attack the person. "Little bastard, don't be rude." The person who came shouted in a low voice, not caring at all. Then the person just pointed out with a finger, bang. The ferocious iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python, which many ancestor saints couldn't do anything to, exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Powerful. What was the strength of this person? A chaos ancestor saint? Or a supreme master? He actually killed the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python so easily. Seeing this scene, the people of the Divine Heavens sect who hadn't killed the python were all stunned. After killing the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python with a finger, the expert pinched 2 fingers in the void and directly imprisoned the soul of the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python, then read its memory. It's really the purple light heavenly rhoda. But who on earth has the purple light heavenly rhoda tower? From a memory of the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python, the expert saw the scene where Murong-Yu took out the purple light heavenly rhoda tower. However, Murong-Yu's appearance was so blurry that he couldn't see it clearly at all. After crushing the soul of the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python with a finger, the expert's figure flashed and entered the nest. At this time, the experts had already rushed in and entered the nest of the iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python. However, they all gained nothing. As for whether they fought, Murong-Yu didn't know, and it wasn't his concern. He was now healing in Hichu Luoshu, and the Tianyuan fruit was quietly floating beside him, emitting traces of black light. It was only later that Murong-Yu learned that after he left, the ferocious iron-boned, steel-scaled, highly venomous python had been killed. Then, there was a battle that was even more terrifying than the one before. After a period of time, when Murong-Yu wanted to go back and uproot the Tianyuan fruit and plant it in Hichu Luoshu, he discovered that the mountain range there had long been flattened by someone with great power. Time acceleration. Murong-Yu began to frantically recover in Hichu Luoshu because he didn't have much time left. If he couldn't submit the mission within half a month, he would be considered to have failed the test. Once he failed, Murong-Yu didn't know what kind of difficulties would be waiting for him in the future. Under the time acceleration of Hichu Luoshu, Murong-Yu used less than a day in the holy world to recover his physical body, mind, and even soul. Then, he teleported back to True Martial Temple. Chapter 14:10. True Martial Outer Hall, second floor of the Hall of Merit. This place was still deserted. Other than the Outer Hall disciple who was still drowsy, there are not many people in the Outer Hall. However, at this moment, Murong-Yu strode up from the True Martial staircase and walked quickly to the counter. Murong-Yu, have you completed the mission? Hearing the footsteps, the sleepy Outer Palace disciple abruptly woke up. His face revealed a trace of joy as he looked in Murong-Yu's direction. However, when he saw that it was Murong-Yu, his face turned gloomy and a sneer flashed across his face. Sorry to disappoint you, Senior. I have completed the mission. Murong-Yu was not polite and said coldly. Since the other party was from the outer hall, even if he smiled at them, the other party would still make things difficult for him. Why should he make trouble for himself? As he spoke, Morongyu had already taken out the crystal core of the great power king, Kong Demon Ape. Rumble. Just as the crystal core of the great power king, Kong Demon Ape, appeared on the second floor of the Hall of Merit, a terrifying aura suddenly burst out like a river and swept in all directions. Suddenly, a powerful and terrifying aura filled the entire second floor with an incomparably tyrannical aura. Dang, dang, dang. The first to bear the brunt was the drowsy outer hall, disciple behind the counter. This guy was actually sent flying by the aura of the great power king, Kong Demon Ape Crystal Core. Next were the rest of the people on the second floor. As for Morongyu, he was already prepared, so the aura of the great power king, Kong Demon Ape Crystal Core did not have any effect on him. Morongyu, you did this on purpose. After being sent flying, the outer hall disciple immediately stabilized his body. However, his face was pale as he looked at Morongyu with shame and anger. Senior, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't speak whatever you want. I am here to submit the mission, so I naturally have to take out the mission item and give it to you. Isn't this normal? Why would I do it on purpose? Morongyu sneered in his heart and said with a cold face. However, Morongyu's eyes were filled with ridicule, because he did on purpose. It was common knowledge that these fierce beasts and demonic beasts' crystal cores, as well as saint godheads, contained powerful auras. However, under normal circumstances, these crystal cores and saint godheads merely exuded an aura without any corresponding power. For example, the large power king Kong Demonic Ape's crystal core in Morongyu's hands emitted the tyrannical aura of the large power king Kong Demonic Ape when it was alive, which could intimidate anyone below him. Of course, it was only to intimidate them. Because it did not erupt with the corresponding strength, it did not cause any substantial harm to those who were intimidated. If Morongyu activated the power of this crystal core, he would definitely be able to kill this outer palace disciple. However, Morongyu was here to hand in the mission, not to kill. Moreover, there is no need to waste this crystal core to kill this outer palace disciple. With his strength, he could easily kill him. The outer palace disciple was enraged. Endless killing intent burst out from his body. But what Morongyu said was the truth. He couldn't do anything to Morongyu. Of course, if he wanted to make things difficult for Morongyu, he had plenty of means. Therefore, he smiled sinisterly and said in a cold voice, Morongyu, how do I know this is the large power king Kong Demonic Ape's crystal core? All crystal cores are the same. Don't think you can fool me with some garbage crystal core. Moreover, everyone knows that the large power king Kong Demonic Ape's strength is incomparable. Even an ancient saint can't do anything to it. Not to mention it's in the depths of the fierce beast mountain range. A low-level, imperishable realm cultivator like you can't enter the fierce beast mountain range. Good. Morongyu, you're really audacious. You dare to fool me. Fool the Mayor Hall. Today, I'll take you down and punish you. The outer palace disciple shouted and jumped out from behind the counter. He stretched out his big hand and grabbed the large power king Kong Demonic Ape's crystal core in Morongyu's hand. If he took the crystal core and then replaced it with another fierce beast crystal core, Morongyu would become unreasonable even if he was in the right. Morongyu was furious and almost couldn't help but want to kill. This outer palace disciple was really too audacious. He dared to publicly slander Morongyu and ignore the Mayor Hall's rules. Were those big shots in the outer palace really so unscrupulous? Even a Mayor Hall's elder was under their control. However, although Morongyu was furious and wanted to kill, he didn't retreat. However, he didn't attack. Instead, he retreated. If he attacked, then the other party would immediately add another crime of disrespecting his elders and beating up a Mayor Hall disciple. In that case, the Mayor Hall's experts would definitely deal with him. Unless Morongyu didn't want to stay in the Mayor Hall anymore, he couldn't attack in the Mayor Hall. In the process of retreating, Morongyu's eyes were filled with killing intent. Morongyu's killing intent towards the outer palace disciple in front of him and the big shots in the outer palace became more and more intense. At the same time, he also felt that the true martial temple was declining. Even now, it was still the strongest temple in the human clan. However, who knew if the true martial temple was really strong or if it was just a boast? Murong felt that the true martial temple's people were wantonly suppressing other disciples. This kind of sect couldn't be that strong. Could it be that the true martial temple's strength is just a facade? Is it just the true martial supreme who is strong? Murong thought. His guess wasn't without reason. Ever since he joined the true martial temple, he had been suppressed in the preparatory hall. Now, the outer palace disciples continued to suppress him. It wasn't hard to imagine that the inner palace of the true martial temple would be the same. After all, if the inner palace of the true martial temple wasn't like this, how could the outer palace disciples dare to suppress a genius so wantonly? As the saying goes, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. Perhaps the true martial temple really was just a facade. Because the true martial supreme was stronger than the unparalleled supreme, the true martial temple could trample the unparalleled palace underfoot. As for the other holy grounds, because they didn't have a supreme, they were naturally not as strong as the true martial temple and the unparalleled palace. Arrogant because of the favor. If the true martial temple continued like this, it would definitely decline. If the true martial supreme died, the true martial temple wouldn't even be considered a holy ground. It would immediately be trampled under the feet of the other holy grounds. However, if that's the case, why did the little lowly want to join the true martial temple? Murong had a flash of doubt in his heart. He knew that the little lowly's identity was definitely not simple. The reason why she asked him to join the true martial temple was definitely not a casual remark. Little bastard, you dare to escape? Let's see where you can escape to. The outer palace disciple was in the profound sage realm. He stretched out his hand, but he couldn't even touch the corner of Murong's clothes. Thus, he flew into a rage out of humiliation. Seeing this scene, the other disciples on the second floor immediately surrounded them. Hearing the roar of the outer palace disciple, many disciples on the first floor also rushed up. More and more people came. However, under the watchful eyes of so many people, he, a profound sage realm powerhouse, couldn't even take down a rank 1 undead realm disciple. This made the outer palace disciple even more furious. Little bastard, you have the audacity to use the crystal cores of other vicious beasts to pass off as the crystal cores of the vicious beasts required for the mission. This kind of blatant disregard of the merit hall is really shameless. Why haven't you surrendered yet? The outer palace disciple shouted. Hearing this, the other disciples all looked at Murong, their eyes full of contempt. It's fine if you don't have the ability to complete the mission, but you actually dared to use the crystal cores of other vicious beasts to pass off as the mission items. How audacious. You can't even kill an undead realm vicious beast. You don't have the qualifications to become an outer palace disciple of our true martial temple. You should just kill this kind of person. Everyone was discussing, criticizing, and sneering at Murong. The outer palace disciple sneered again and again, but in his heart, he was very proud. However, Murong's movement technique was really too brilliant. He couldn't touch Murong at all, which made him quite depressed. Murong's face became more and more gloomy. I'm just a rank 1 undead realm powerhouse, but they asked me to kill a Sage King realm vigorous king, Kong Demon Ape. This is the assessment task for me to become an outer palace disciple from a janitor disciple. When I used all the means and resources that I had accumulated for countless years to finally kill the vigorous King Kong Demon Ape, they framed me for handing in the crystal cores of other vicious beasts when I came to submit the mission. I know that they are suppressing me, because I'm a weapon refining and alchemy genius. A janitor disciple who can refine middle-grade sacred weapons, because I'm Murong. Is this the true martial temple? Is the true martial temple already controlled by them? Is it their true martial temple? I joined because of the strength of the true martial temple. If this is the real true martial temple, then I don't have to be a disciple of the true martial temple. Murong was also angry and roared loudly. Hiss! Hearing Murong's words, the surrounding people all sucked in a breath of cold air. An undead realm disciple went to kill a vigorous king, Kong Demon Ape? That's a terrifying, vicious beast with the strength of a sage king. He's Moronyu, a weapon refining and alchemy genius among the janitor disciples. How long has he been a janitor disciple? He broke through to the undead realm so quickly. Everyone was shocked, but they also felt that it was a pity, because they had vaguely heard about Moronyu. He was suppressed by the big shots among the Outer Palace disciples. Although they felt that it was a pity, no one said anything, because they couldn't afford to offend those people. Audacious madman, talking nonsense. You dare to slander an Outer Palace disciple and insult the true martial temple. You deserve to die. Hearing Morongyu's words, the Outer Palace disciple's expression changed wildly. He roared again and again, erupting with extreme strength to grab Morongyu. Seeing everyone's reaction, Morongyu's heart turned cold. Forget it. It's fine if I don't want to be a true martial temple disciple. If this place doesn't accept people, there will be other places to accept people. I don't believe that other temples can't accept me. Morongyu fiercely gritted his teeth. His eyes became firm, and killing intent burst out. Chapter 14:11. In the punishment hall of the true martial sacred hall. The punishment hall was the main hall of the true martial temple that was in charge of punishment. It didn't matter if the disciples violated the rules or if other forces or saints offended the true martial temple. The punishment hall was the one that dealt with all sorts of matters. At this moment, a burly middle-aged man was sitting cross-legged in one of the main halls of the punishment hall. He seemed to be cultivating. Even so, a terrifying aura like that of a prehistoric beast erupted from his body. It was as if a primordial beast was lurking there, ready to unleash its greatest power at any time to take someone's life. Suddenly, a few outer hall disciples of the true martial sacred hall hurriedly walked in. However, these outer hall disciples stopped when they stepped into the hall. They glanced at the middle-aged man who was resting with his eyes closed before lowering their heads. They didn't even dare to breathe. Elder Qin, Yijun, Huiyang, and the others have something to report. After they stopped, Yijun bowed to the middle-aged man and spoke in a deep voice. The middle-aged man slowly opened his eyes like a primordial beast. Immediately, an extremely violent and powerful aura swept over, violently suppressing Yijun and the others at the door. Yijun and the others felt the aura in their bodies churn like a raging sea. He couldn't help but take a few steps back with a tung-tung sound. Fortunately, the middle-aged man who was like a ferocious beast quickly retracted his aura. Even so, Yijun and the others still didn't dare to breathe. This man who looked like a primordial beast was one of the elders of the punishment hall. It was said that his strength had reached the level of a chaotic ancestor saint. Moreover, he was vicious and merciless. Regardless of whether it was a disciple of the true martial sacred hall or someone from other forces, as long as they violated the rules of the true martial sacred hall or offended the true martial sacred hall, he would definitely not show mercy and mercilessly punish them. He would even directly kill them. He was one of the most terrifying elders of the punishment hall. Even though Yijun and the others were big shots among the outer hall disciples, they didn't dare to offend this elder. Qin Ming's gaze slowly flashed across Yijun and the others. A strange look flashed across his face. There weren't many disciples in the true martial sacred hall who were proficient in weapon refinement and alchemy. It could even be said that the true martial sacred hall was at the bottom of the human sacred grounds in terms of weapon refinement and alchemy. Therefore, the sect would focus on cultivating disciples with talent in weapon refinement and alchemy. They might even make an exception for him. It was just like how the elder that Moronyu had met before had asked Moronyu to join the inner palace. Therefore, when Qin Ming saw Yijun and the other 5 disciples, he had no choice but to take them seriously. This was because Yijun and the others were either big shots in the true martial temple's outer hall or big shots in alchemy. They were all disciples that the true martial temple had focused on nurturing. It wasn't that Qin Ming couldn't afford to offend these people. He could kill these people if he wanted to. However, he just didn't want the true martial temple to lose talents. What is it? Qin Ming asked with an indifferent expression. To him, being able to behave like this was already considered to be very amiable. Elder Qin, it's like this. Recently, a servant disciple of our true martial sacred palace has offended his superiors, offended the inner palace and outer palace disciples, and even killed outer palace disciples several times. At this time, he even wanted to use the crystal cores of other ferocious beasts to pass off as the crystal cores of the mission beasts. Now, he was fighting in the true martial sacred hall's main hall, and he wanted to kill the disciples of the Hall of Merit. We really couldn't stand it anymore, and we want to capture him and hand him over to the punishment hall. However, we are from the punishment hall after all, and it's not good for us to overstep our authority. Therefore, we can only report this matter to Elder Qin. I hope Elder Qin can deal with it as soon as possible. Li Qin took a step forward and said in a deep voice. He was the master blacksmith of the outer palace of the true martial temple, and he was a powerful existence who could refine peerless sacred weapons. There's actually such a traitor? After hearing Yi Jun's words, Qin Ming, who had a fiery temper, was immediately enraged. A violent killing intent surged out and shrouded Yi Jun and the others, causing their blood to churn. They were inexplicably horrified. Han Ping, Luo Wu, are you here? After being enraged, Qin Ming suddenly roared. Before he finished speaking, Yi Jun and the others saw two figures appear out of thin air in the main hall. Although they had long known that Qin Ming's two eldest disciples were powerful, they couldn't help but be shocked when they saw the strength they displayed with their own eyes. Quickly go to the second floor of the Hall of Merit to capture Morongyu. If there's any resistance, kill without mercy, Qin Ming shouted coldly. Han Ping and Luo Wu immediately responded. Then their figures flashed and disappeared on the spot. They flew toward the Hall of Merit at full speed. After Han Ping and Luo Wu left, Yi Jun and the others looked at each other, then bid farewell and left as well. After angering Elder Qin Ming, Morongyu is dead for sure this time. After leaving the punishment hall, Yi Jun smiled sinisterly. The others also smiled tacitly. Originally, they wanted to kill Morongyu with their own hands. This was because they had sent people to kill Morongyu many times, but they were unsuccessful. As long as Morongyu became an outer palace disciple, it would be even more difficult for them to kill him. Moreover, as long as Morongyu didn't leave the true martial temple, they wouldn't dare to make a move in the true martial temple. Once Morongyu became an outer palace disciple, then he could accept missions to refine weapons and pills. At that time, Morongyu, who had a lot of merits, could exchange them for various cultivation resources. At that time, Morongyu's strength would be even more powerful. When he became a servant disciple, he was only in the third level of the undead realm. Now, only a few years had passed, and he had already broken through to the undead realm. This kind of cultivation speed gave Yi Jun and the others a strong threat. Therefore, they devised such a scheme, wanting to borrow Qin Ming's hand to kill Morongyu. They all knew that once Morongyu fell into Qin Ming's hands, he would die without a doubt. When Han Ping, Luo Wu, and the others were ordered to capture Morongyu, Morongyu was completely infuriated by the outer palace disciple of the Hall of Merit. If this place doesn't want me, there will be a place for me. These bastards are going too far. It's fine if I don't want to be a true martial temple disciple. Morongyu was furious, and a thought of rebelling against the true martial temple appeared in his mind. After this thought appeared, the various negative emotions that had been suppressed over the years became even more intense. The thought of making Morongyu rebel against the true martial temple became even more intense. Since he wants to rebel against the true martial temple, then this person must not be left alive. Morongyu's heart was ruthless, and his killing intent was overflowing. At the same time, the outer palace disciple rushed over again. Since you want to die, then I'll fulfill your wish. Morongyu roared in his mind. This time, he did not blindly dodge, but directly rushed up. The power in his body surged like a stormy sea. The impact caused Murong Yu's clothes to flutter without any wind. Thousand Army Elephant pulling fist. Murong Yu roared in his heart and punched out. The Outer Palace disciple was very angry because after fighting for a long time, he did not even touch Murong Yu's clothes. At this moment, he saw Murong Yu actually punching over. A touch of joy and ridicule immediately appeared on his face. He was a profound sage, and Murong Yu was only at the low-level undead realm. There was a gap of a whole realm between the two. He did not think that Murong Yu was his opponent just because his movement technique was good. Therefore, he grinned and punched out as well. Is Murong Yu crazy? He actually wants to fight the opponent head-on? Seeing Murong Yu's actions, the disciples watching from the side all shook their heads. No one was optimistic about Murong Yu's chances. Boom! In a split second, the fists of Murong Yu and Murong Yu fiercely collided in midair, erupting with an earth-shattering sound. Then, a figure was fiercely sent flying like a broken rag doll. Murong Yu is dead for sure. Everyone shook their heads, feeling that it was a pity. However, in the next moment, their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. This was because they discovered that the one who had been sent flying was not Murong Yu, but the profound sage realm outer hall disciple. What's going on? Murong Yu actually sent a profound sage realm outer hall disciple flying with one punch? Moreover, that disciple seems to be seriously injured. Everyone's faces were filled with shock and disbelief. That outer hall disciple madly vomited blood in midair, and his face was also filled with fear and astonishment. Who is Murong Yu? Just as Murong Yu sent that outer hall disciple flying with one punch, Han Ping and Luo Wu had already appeared on the second floor of the Merit Palace Hall. After a loud shout, before anyone could answer, their gazes had already locked onto Murong Yu. Their intuition told them that this person was the one they wanted to capture. Therefore, they looked at each other and then simultaneously rushed towards Murong Yu. Murong Yu, who was about to take advantage of the situation to chase after them, suddenly discovered that he had been locked onto by two incomparably powerful forces. Therefore, he turned his head and saw two extremely intense rays of light rushing towards him. Audacious madman, don't be rude. We are the first elders of the Punishment Hall, Elder Qin Ming. We have been ordered to capture Murong Yu. Why don't you surrender without a fight? Luo Wu shouted. His speed was not slow, and he had already stretched out his large hand to grab Murong Yu. Punishment Hall? Hearing these three words, the majority of the people in the hall could not help but tremble. To them, the Punishment Hall was definitely the most terrifying place in the true martial temple. It was a place they were unwilling to take even half a step into for the rest of their lives. However, these two first disciples had actually come to capture Murong Yu today. What was going on? After coming back to their senses, they all looked at Murong Yu with sympathetic gazes, feeling that Murong Yu was definitely going to die. Murong Yu felt their gazes, and his heart sank. However, since he had already decided to rebel against the true martial temple, not to mention the first disciples of Elder Qin Ming, even if Elder Qin Ming came personally, he would not be able to stop him from killing. Therefore, he only snorted coldly, then took a step forward and charged towards the first disciple who had been sent flying by his punch. Chapter 14:12. You're courting death. When they saw that Murong Yu had not only ignored them, but he had also ignored their words and openly killed the Outer Hall disciple in front of the Punishment Hall disciples, they were furious. Han Ping and Luo Wu were immediately enraged. An extremely violent killing intent burst out from their bodies and soared into the sky. It shocked all the true martial temple disciples on the second floor of the Achievement Hall. Their hearts sank and their souls trembled. With a flash, Han Ping and Luo Wu both used the powerful strength of the Saint Ruler realm. After taking a step forward, they appeared behind Murong Yu. Their outstretched hands were already above Murong Yu's head and fiercely pressed down. They wanted to kill Murong Yu. Before they left the Punishment Hall, Elder Qin Ming had said that if Murong Yu resisted, they could kill him on the spot. Therefore, Han Ping and Luo Wu did not show any mercy and directly killed him. Seeing this, Morongyu was even more furious. His thoughts of rebelling against the true martial temple became even more intense. Even if you're saint rulers, you can't stop me from killing him. Morongyu sneered. His figure flashed and directly smashed through the void. He actually dodged the unprepared attacks of Han Ping and Luo Wu. Although Luo Wu and Luo Wu were saint rulers, they did not know that Murongyu's speed was so fast. Therefore, they were careless and Murongyu dodged them. Soul-devouring slash. After Murongyu appeared behind the outer hall disciple, he roared in his heart. Then, an extremely violent soul power rushed out of his soul space and condensed into a huge, transparent saber in the void. It fiercely slashed the outer hall disciple's body. Slash! The saber condensed from soul power directly penetrated the outer hall disciple's body and slashed the outer hall disciple's soul. After a soft sound, the outer hall disciple's soul was directly cut in half by Murongyu. After the soul was cut in half, it would not die immediately and could be reformed. However, how could Murongyu give him a chance? With just a thought, Murongyu swallowed the two halves of the soul into his stomach. Then, he refined it and made it a part of the soul energy in his soul pool. Plop! After his soul was devoured, the outer palace disciple died, and his corpse fell to the ground. At this time, Han Ping and Luo Wu finally reacted and attacked Murongyu again. No matter what reason Murongyu had, publicly killing an outer hall disciple of the true martial temple on the second floor of the achievement hall was a capital offense. However, since Murongyu had already decided to rebel against the true martial temple, he naturally wasn't afraid of this. Just as he was about to enter the Hichu Luo Shu and leave the true martial temple, he paused and looked coldly at Han Ping and Luo Wu. In for a penny, in for a pound. I'll kill these two as well. Murongyu made up his mind. However, with his current strength, he didn't even have a 10% chance of killing these two super experts of the Holy King realm. I can only rely on a surprise attack. It's best if I can kill them. Even if I can't, there won't be any losses. Murongyu changed his mind and immediately decided to kill Han Ping and Luo Wu. God's descent. After making up his mind, Murongyu had a plan to kill them. The first thing he did was to use a skill that affected the mind, Deity's Descent. Boom! When the enormous God's shadow appeared in the void above Murongyu's head, all the disciples of the true martial temple on the second floor were stunned. They didn't even have time to react. Sky-destroying stars. Soul-devouring slash. Time reversal. After using God's Descent, Murongyu once again used a soul attack to kill Han Ping and Luo Wu. God's Descent made them lose their minds for an instant. In the process of losing their minds, they couldn't use their strength to defend or attack. If he used a soul attack now, the soul of an ordinary person would definitely die. Of course, it also depended on whether the opponent was strong or not. If Murongyu's opponent was an honorable martial artist, his God's Descent wouldn't affect the opponent's mind at all. As for Holy Kings, they would probably only be affected for a tenth of an instant. Whether or not Murongyu could kill their souls would depend on this 1/10 of an instant. What a thief! Just as Murongyu's soul attack entered Han Ping's soul space, Han Ping had already woken up from his dazed state. He immediately realized what was going on. He roared angrily. The terrifying power of the Holy King realm surged in his body and entered his soul space like raging waves. A large amount of power even appeared near his soul space and blocked Murongyu's soul attack. At the same time, he slapped Luo Wu, who was not far away from him. With the strength of Murongyu's soul power now, it was still difficult to tear apart the power of a Holy King realm powerhouse and kill the opponent's soul. However, Han Ping's power could easily tear apart Murongyu's power. Compared to Han Ping, Luo Wu's power was still slightly weaker. This was because when Han Ping woke up, Luo Wu was still unconscious. Because of this, Han Ping slapped Luo Wu, wanting to wake him up. However, although Han Ping's reaction was fast, he couldn't wake Luo Wu up in time. When he attacked, Morong Yu's soul attack had already slashed fiercely on Luo Wu's soul. Puchi! Puchi! Luo Wu's soul was immediately torn into thousands of pieces. However, to a Holy King powerhouse, as long as he wasn't completely annihilated, he could still reform his soul. Moreover, Luo Wu also woke up when his soul was torn apart. He roared, and a terrifying power surged into his soul space. At the same time, he threw a punch at Morong Yu. He knew that as long as he killed Morong Yu's soul attack would naturally dissipate. Han Ping also thought so, because his attack on Morong Yu was much earlier than Luo Wu's. Time reversal. At this moment, Morong Yu used the power of time at the right time and reversed the space between him and Han Ping. As a result, the numerous true martial temple's outer hall disciples on the second floor of the achievement hall saw a scene that shocked them to the core. Han Ping and Luo Wu's attacks had directly pierced through Morong Yu and landed on his body. However, Morong Yu acted as if nothing had happened. What's going on? Everyone was shocked and felt that it was unbelievable. As the parties involved, Han Ping and Luo Wu were even more shocked. Luo Wu, in particular, felt fear and a sense of death at the same time. God's descent, soul-devouring slash. After reversing time and space, Morong Yu once again used deity's descend and a soul attack. As a result, Han Ping, Luo Wu, and the surrounding people were all stunned again. Han Ping was still fine and recovered in less than a tenth of an instant. However, Luo Wu's soul was already injured, and he couldn't wake up this time. With a single soul-devouring slash, Luo Wu's soul was torn into millions of pieces by Morong Yu. Even if he could recover, it would take an extremely long time. Moreover, Morong Yu didn't give him chance. After shattering Luo Wu's soul into millions upon millions of pieces, Morong Yu unleashed the soul-devouring ability he'd gained after fusing with the soul-devouring orb to its limits. He directly sucked Luo Wu's soul fragments out of his spiritual space. Plop! After Luo Wu died, his body fell straight to the ground. Hiss! Morong Yu actually killed a disciple of the punishment hall? He's dead for sure now. At the sight of this, the people in the hall, who had already recovered, were all shocked. Each and every one of them looked at Morong Yu in disbelief as they continuously sucked in a breath of cold air. Morong Yu, you're courting death. Han Ping shattered Morong Yu's power of time and charged out of reverse time to see the scene of Luo Wu's death. As a result, he flew into a rage and exploded with his strongest attack towards Morong Yu. Morong Yu's figure flashed and retreated. His eyes flashed with a chilling, killing intent, as if he was contemplating whether he should kill Han Ping as well. Rumble. Just as Morong Yu was lost in thought, an aura even more terrifying than that of a saint ruler spread out from outside the achievement hall. At this moment, a powerful and ethereal aura suddenly locked onto Morong Yu. At this moment, Morong Yu's body felt as if it had been struck by lightning. His whole body was in excruciating pain, and his hair stood on end. Streams of blood continuously shot out from his pores. It was extremely terrifying. It's at least an ancestor saint. Morong Yu's heart skipped a beat. With a thought, he disappeared from where he was and entered Hichu Luo Shu. Rumble. The moment Morong Yu disappeared, a large hand condensed from power appeared out of thin air, where he was originally standing, and grabbed at the void. Where do you think you're going? A cold voice sounded. The large hand shook violently and grabbed at the void again. Then, everyone saw the large hand shatter the void and enter space-time, grabbing at Morong Yu. Whoosh! Morong Yu entered Hichu Luo Shu. However, he suddenly felt a sense of danger. He turned his head and saw a large hand following him into the Hichu Luo Shu world. An aura of death instantly enveloped his heart. Morong Yu's heart shook, and the Hichu Luo Shu closed fiercely. At the same time, he was about to teleport away. However, to his horror, the large hand shook out of thin air, and a powerful force blocked the Hichu Luo Shu from closing. It seemed to have opened a passage in Hichu Luo Shu, and because of this, The Hichu Luoshu could not be teleported away. It's over. Morong Yu's heart tightened. Then, he took out the Inyan cauldron and various other treasures to attack the large hand that was grabbing at him. However, the large hand's strength was extremely terrifying. With a light shake, it sent the Inyan cauldron and other treasures flying. These treasures could not stop the large hand's attack at all. Chapter 14:13. Morong Yu spat out a mouthful of blood as he was sent flying in the Hichu Luoshu. Little bastard, you dare to kill a disciple of my punishment hall? You must be tired of living. Today I'll kill you. A cold voice rang out. The huge hand that had rushed into the Hichu Luoshu shook once again, shattering the space around the Hichu Luoshu as it grabbed at Morong Yu with lightning speed. Morong Yu's heart was enveloped by an extremely strong aura of death. Morong Yu also knew that if he couldn't shatter this huge hand and force it out of the Hichu Luoshu, he would definitely die in the true martial temple. Moreover, he had to shatter this huge hand even faster. Otherwise, once he was discovered by the other experts of the true martial temple and attacked, Morong Yu really wouldn't have any chance of escaping. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to take out the heavenly purple pagoda. With Morong Yu's current strength, whether it was the Hichu Luoshu or the Inyan cauldron, it was impossible for him to unleash their full power. Only the heavenly purple pagoda. Fight! Morong Yu gritted his teeth. At the same time he took out the heavenly purple pagoda, the power that had already surged in his body exploded out like a raging wave, pouring into the heavenly purple pagoda. Boom! After an earth-shaking explosion, the heavenly purple pagoda exploded with a dazzling five-colored holy light. A vast, powerful, and incomparably terrifying aura suddenly erupted, instantly engulfing the entire Hichu Luoshu. However, for some reason, the five-colored holy light and supreme aura that erupted from the heavenly purple pagoda actually didn't rush out of the Hichu Luoshu. One had to know that when the heavenly purple pagoda was first taken out in the Saint Tomb, the five-colored holy light and supreme aura had rushed out of the Saint Tomb, and even the experts far away in the holy world could sense it. Could it be because of the Hichu Luoshu? Hichu Luoshu suppression of the heavenly purple pagoda? However, Morong Yu was unaware of all this. He didn't have the spare time to observe these things. Five-colored holy light, a supreme weapon. In the punishment hall, Qin Ming abruptly opened his eyes and a cold glint flashed in them. His eyes flickered with intense greed. Who is this kid? He actually has the purple light heavenly Civ Pagoda. Qin Ming was extremely shocked. However, his face was soon covered with greed. If I can obtain a Supreme Being weapon and further comprehend it, I will have a chance to reach the Supreme Being realm in this lifetime. Qin Ming's eyes were filled with greed as he looked through the void and stared at Morong Yu and Li Chia in the achievement hall. At the same time, the giant hand that had rushed into Hichu Luoshu once again grabbed at Morong Yu. Kill! Morong Yu roared as he poured all of his strength into the purple radiance heavenly Civ Pagoda. Even his soul force was poured into the pagoda. Rumble! The void shattered as the purple radiance heavenly Civ Pagoda turned into a five-colored holy light and tore the void apart. It carried a terrifying aura that could destroy the heavens and earth as it pressed down. Insignificant skill. Qin Ming snorted. He didn't think that Morong Yu could unleash much of the purple radiance heavenly Civ Pagoda's power. Therefore, he only snorted and flipped his hand, quickly grabbing at the purple radiance heavenly Civ Pagoda. He actually wanted to seize the purple radiance heavenly Civ Pagoda. Morong Yu sneered as he watched Qin Ming's hand grab at the purple radiance heavenly Civ Pagoda. Just as he poured his soul power into the purple radiance heavenly Civ Pagoda, a strange feeling suddenly appeared in his mind. As for what it was exactly, Morong Yu couldn't understand. However, he roughly understood what it was. The purple radiance heavenly Civ Pagoda that had been poured with soul power would unleash a power that was much stronger than before. As expected, Morong Yu quickly saw the result. In the blink of an eye, Qin Ming's hand had already grabbed the purple radiance heavenly sieve pagoda. At this moment, Qin Ming, who was in the punishment hall, revealed a sinister smile and a proud expression. He knew that this supreme weapon would become his personal possession from now on. However, his smile quickly froze. Boom! The moment Qin Ming's hand grabbed the purple radiance heavenly sieve pagoda, the purple radiance heavenly sieve pagoda exploded with five-colored holy light. A terrifying power erupted, almost shattering Qin Ming's large hand into millions of pieces. However, it was only almost. After all, it didn't really shatter Qin Ming's hand. This was because when he realized that his hand was about to shatter, Qin Ming's boundless power poured into his hand. After receiving the infusion of power, his large hand recondensed. However, if that was the case, the smile on Qin Ming's face wouldn't have frozen. Just as his hand was about to shatter, Qin Ming's soul was enveloped by an extremely strong aura of death. At the same time, Qin Ming was shocked to discover that a strong and inexplicable power followed his hand and tore through the air towards his body. The strong aura of death that his soul felt originated from this inexplicable power. Soul attack. Qin Ming was shocked. With a thought, he cut off his power. It wasn't that he was being too careful, but that the power was too fast. In less than an instant, it had already rushed into the punishment hall. If he was 1/100th of an instant slower, that power would have bombarded his body. Then, it would have destroyed his soul. What a terrifying soul attack. Mu Rongyu, who was in the Hichu Luo Shu, was shocked. Although he had poured all his soul power into the purple radiance heavenly sieve pagoda, that power was probably only enough to kill an ordinary ancient saint. It couldn't even kill a sage king. However, the soul attack that he felt just now was 10 times more powerful than when he was at his peak. It was even 100 times more powerful. It was because of this that Qin Ming's soul felt an aura of death. The purple radiance heavenly sieve pagoda actually had the power to strengthen soul attacks. After discovering this possibility, Mu Rongyu was naturally overjoyed. However, although he was overjoyed, he didn't get carried away. He knew that he was still in danger. With a thought, the He-Tu and the Luo Shu were completely closed. Then, after a teleportation, he left the true martial temple. From then on, Mu Rongyu was like a bird flying in the sky. Even the true martial temple, the strongest holy land of the human clan, couldn't do anything to him, unless the supreme true martial saint took action personally. Whoosh! Just as Hichu Luo Shu was teleported away, a tall figure appeared out of thin air on the second floor of the Hall of Merit. Master, Luhi. After seeing the person who had come, Han Ping hurriedly bowed and was about to speak with grief and indignation. However, after being glared at by Qin Ming, he had no choice but to swallow the words he was about to say. Qin Ming's enormous divine thought instantly enveloped the entire Hall of Merit and the surrounding void. However, there was no trace of Mu Rongyu. After searching a few times, he had to reluctantly admit that Mu Rongyu had escaped from the true martial temple. After that, a few powerful experts appeared in the true martial temple, but they still couldn't find Mu Rongyu. Then, the search for Mu Rongyu expanded to the entire true martial temple and the vicinity of the true martial temple. What about Mu Rongyu? He had already left the true martial temple. After a few days, Mu Rongyu's strength and injuries had all healed. However, he had consumed more than half of his soul pool and still couldn't fill it up. Although he had a lot of soul power, it wasn't as easy to recover it as cultivation power. What should I do in the future? Mu Rongyu was now thinking about this problem. He knew that publicly killing an outer hall disciple of the true martial temple and betraying the true martial temple was a huge crime. Let's see if the true martial temple has any follow-up plans. Mu Rongyu pondered for a moment and sneered. Then, he appeared in a border city of the true martial temple. Of course, he had changed his appearance. After walking around the city, Mu Rongyu's face darkened. Just as he thought, the true martial temple had begun to publicly arrest him in the holy world. The reason was none other than Mu Rongyu publicly killing a disciple of the true martial temple and stealing a treasure of the true martial temple. However, what made Murong slightly relieved was that the true martial temple didn't announce that he had a supreme weapon. Murong estimated that Qin Ming was probably the only one in the true martial temple who knew that he had a supreme weapon. This guy definitely wanted to take the supreme weapon for himself and wouldn't leak the news, just like the Heavenly Light Divine Sect. However, paper couldn't wrap fire. One day, this news would leak out. If Murong didn't have powerful strength, he wouldn't have the power to protect himself. In the end, it was Murong who wasn't strong enough. Otherwise, how could the people of the true martial temple dare to do anything to him? Sure, have you heard? Recently, a traitor appeared in the true martial temple. Now, the true martial temple has issued a kill order in the entire holy world to kill Murong. Moreover, they ordered that no other sect is allowed to accept Murong. Otherwise, they will be the mortal enemy of the true martial temple. The true martial temple is too overbearing. They weren't like this before. Someone asked puzzledly, "Hey, you don't know." It is said that when Murong betrayed the true martial temple, he stole a treasure of the true martial temple. Moreover, Murong is a monstrous genius in artifact refining and alchemy. At the undead stage, he can refine pills with a compatibility of more than 90% and refine sacred artifacts with extreme formations. I reckon that the true martial temple doesn't want other sects to accept Murong. After all, among the 10 great holy lands, the true martial temple's artifact refining and alchemy abilities are at the bottom. Ordinary sects are afraid of the true martial temple. The other holy lands are not afraid. Now, the other 9 holy lands of the human clan have already extended an olive branch to Murong. Among them, there's also the most mysterious holy land with the least number of people. Infernal Affairs. What? The Infernal Affairs also extended an olive branch to Murong? When they heard this, everyone couldn't help but exclaim. Chapter 14:14. The Seamless Path originated from Buddha's saying, "Receive the seamless path and never die." Longevity is a great calamity in the seamless hell. This was also known as the Avicii Hell. It was the lowest and most bitter level of the 18 levels of hell that the common folk referred to. The seamless path in the holy world was not hell, but one of the 10 great holy lands of the human race. However, it was different from the true martial temple and unparalleled palace. The seamless path was the most mysterious holy land of the human race, the most mysterious sect. For example, although outsiders could not enter the true martial temple, unparalleled palace, and other important places, they knew the approximate location. Where was the seamless path? No one knew. Even the other holy lands of the 10 great holy lands did not know. Unlike the true martial temple and unparalleled palace, which had more than 100 million disciples, the seamless path had the fewest disciples. Legend had it that the seamless path only had a few dozen disciples. Although the seamless path had very few disciples, each one of them was the most outstanding genius in the world. It could even be said that only the most monstrous of existences had the qualifications to become a disciple of the seamless path. Moreover, they only had the qualifications. Otherwise, the seamless path's disciples would not be so few. Of course, these were all legends. What was the real situation? No one knew. However, the seamless path was indeed the most mysterious and powerful of the 10 great holy lands of the human race. According to legend, although the seamless path's disciples were few, each one of them had monstrous strength. They had all reached the peak of the primal chaos ancestor sage realm and were only a step away from the supreme realm. Although the true martial temple was the leader of the 10 great holy lands, it was the most powerful holy land. However, that was only in terms of overall strength. The true martial temple had too many people, and there were many primal chaos ancestor sage realm experts. In terms of numbers, the other holy lands could not compare. However, in terms of individual strength, the seamless path was the strongest. It was said that as long as one became a disciple of the seamless path, the primal chaos ancestor sage realm was the most basic. Now, the seamless path had extended an olive branch to Murong Yu. Once Murong Yu joined the seamless path, his achievements would at least reach the primal chaos ancestor sage realm. True martial temple, unparalleled palace, heavenly dipper sect. The 10 great holy lands of the human race flashed through Murong Yu's mind. Other than the spaceless Tao, the other 9 holy lands were similar to the true martial temple in that they had many disciples. If he joined these sects, with Murong Yu's talent and monstrous talent, he would definitely be able to stand out and become the most dazzling star of these holy lands. However, Murong Yu also knew that the true martial temple was stronger than the other sacred grounds. This kind of sacred ground was filled with all kinds of open and secret struggles, like the unparalleled palace and the heavenly dipper sect. With Murong Yu's aptitude, it was likely that he would be suppressed if he became their disciple. Then it could only be the infernal Tao. The infernal Taoists had the fewest members, and it was said that they were the most united sect. If he joined this sect, then there would be no more open and covert struggles, and Murong Yu could cultivate in peace. Furthermore, although the Seamless Society did not have many disciples, they were still very powerful. However, it was still a holy land after all, and had plenty of resources. Furthermore, after countless years of accumulation, the Seamless Society had more resources than the true martial temple. This was because they consumed less resources. In the current human realm, apart from the unparalleled palace and the other 9 sacred grounds, none of the other powers would dare to accept me. Thinking of this, Murong Yu's face darkened again. Now, he only had 2 paths to take. One was to become a loose cultivator, and the other was to join one of the other sacred grounds. Becoming a loose cultivator meant that he lacked all kinds of resources, and Murong Yu was unwilling to do so. Thus, he could only join one of the other sacred grounds. The infernal Tao. Murong Yu's eyes flashed, and he immediately made up his mind. Murong Yu, your way of thinking is the most correct. Joining the infernal Tao is the best choice for you. Our infernal Tao is the most suitable cultivation sacred ground for you. Just as Murong Yu made up his mind, a voice appeared in his mind out of thin air. At the same time, a smiling young man appeared in front of Murong Yu out of thin air. Murong Yu was greatly shocked. One must know that he had been in the restaurant earlier. Although there were people coming and going in the restaurant, Murong Yu was secretly vigilant. However, even with his strength, he didn't know when this youth had appeared here. Surprised, Murong Yu looked at the youth. The youth was dressed in a green robe and had an ordinary face. He was the kind of person who couldn't be found after entering a crowd. However, the power radiating from the youth almost blinded Murong Yu's eyes. It was too strong. It was the strongest power radiance Murong Yu had ever seen. The primal chaos ancestor sage, a super expert among the primal chaos ancestor sages. Murong Yu's pupils suddenly shrank, and he became vigilant. But very soon he relaxed. He didn't feel any killing intent from a youth, and he didn't even feel any bad intentions. He even felt a sense of warmth from the young man. Facing the youth was like facing the warm sunshine of spring, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity. This wasn't an illusion, nor was it the influence of the other party's cultivation method. It was the natural aura the youth exuded. You are. Murong Yu's expression returned to normal, and he stopped looking at the other party's power radiance. If he continued looking, his eyes would be blinded. I am Lu Xiankai, a disciple of the unbroken path. The youth smiled, and it was like a spring breeze. A disciple of the unbroken path. Murong Yu was shocked. How did you find me? At this moment, Murong Yu had changed his appearance. Furthermore, he'd already sealed the true martial temple's disciple token in the depths of the He-Tu and Luo Shu. Now that he'd teleported away, even the true martial temple wouldn't be able to find him. No matter how big the saint's world is, it can't hide from Master's senses. Master already knew that you were here, so I was ordered to come and receive you. In fact, when you ascended to the Saint's world, Master had already been paying attention to you. It was also from then on that he knew that you would betray the true martial sacred hall one day, because you were born to be a member of the unbroken path. The youth continued to speak with a smile, and he didn't panic. However, his words were like a clap of thunder in Murong Yu's ears, causing Murong Yu to feel dizzy and incomparably shocked. Really? Murong Yu couldn't help but ask. All of this was too inconceivable. Were there really people in the world who could predict the future? Murong Yu had never believed that such people existed. Moreover, as his strength continued to increase, he became more and more doubtful. However, this person called Lu Xiankai in front of him was telling him that there really were people in the world who could predict the future. How could Murong Yu not be shocked? Of course. Otherwise, do you think we would meet here so coincidentally? Lu Xiankai smiled. Although he still felt that it was inconceivable, Murong Yu chose to believe it. However, he was puzzled. Senior Brother Lu, what do you mean? I am here on the orders of my master to welcome you and bring you back to the unbroken path. Murong Yu was a little dizzy. You mean I can join the unbroken path and become a disciple of the unbroken path? Lu Xiankai first nodded, then shook his head. He continued, to be precise, you have the qualifications to become a disciple of the unbroken path. Although I am here to welcome you, if you want to become a true disciple of the unbroken path, you still need to pass our test. Even if we know that your talent is monstrous, it is still the same. Murong Yu was overjoyed. This Lu Xiankai, or rather his master, really sent Murong Yu a pillow when he was about to doze off. Murong Yu had wanted to join the unbroken path before, but Lu Xiankai had delivered himself to his door. Okay, I will go with you. Murong Yu replied without any hesitation. Lu Xiankai seemed to know Murong Yu's answer. He just smiled and waved his hand. In the next moment, they disappeared from the restaurant. On the way, Murong Yu suddenly asked, Senior Apprentice Brother Lu, you don't seem to be surprised by my answer at all? I have long since been part of my master's plans. Lu Xiankai laughed. Then can I pass the test and join the unbroken path? Murong Yu's mind spun, and he laughed as well. The mysteries of heaven cannot be revealed. Senior Apprentice Brother Lu, is your so-called master the head of the unbroken path? What level of power does he have? He can actually predict the future? Lu Xiankai just shook his head, not answering. Senior Apprentice Brother Lu, where is the unbroken path? Murong Yu asked again. But what made him speechless was that Lu Xiankai didn't say a word about the unbroken path. In the end, he said, You are not a member of the unbroken path, so I cannot reveal this to you. Once you become an unbroken path disciple, you will naturally know. Murong Yu just needed to shut up. But not long after, he asked, Where are we going? Blue Thunder Valley. Murong Yu was a loss, so Lu Xiankai could only explain. The Blue Thunder Valley was one of the most dangerous places in the holy world. There was no other reason. There was only lightning there. All kinds of lightning. All kinds of tribulation lightning. And tribulation lightning was the power that all saints, fierce beasts, and demonic beasts feared the most. And in the Blue Thunder Valley, the deeper one went, the stronger the lightning became. It was said that in the deepest part of the Blue Thunder Valley, even Chaos Ancestor Realm experts didn't dare to take half a step into the lightning pool. Because other than powerful lightning, there were all kinds of lightning beasts. Several days later, Murong Yu and Lu Xiankai appeared outside the Blue Thunder Valley. Looking at the world of lightning in front of him, Huang Xiaolong could feel waves of world-ending pressure, even with his lightning saint godhead. And even though he had frequently experienced lightning tribulations, a sense of dread rose in his heart. The tribulation lightning was too terrifying. Your mission is to enter the Blue Thunder Valley and obtain the token to become an unbroken path disciple. In fact, it is your identity token in the unbroken path. If you succeed in obtaining the token, you can become an unbroken path disciple. Of course, you only have 10 years. If you can't complete this mission within 10 years, you will fail the test. Chapter 14:15. With a flash, Lu Xiankai disappeared from Murong Yu's line of sight. It was unknown if he had returned or if he was hiding somewhere nearby. In any case, Muronyu could no longer sense Lu Xiankai's aura. Looking at the vast world of lightning, Muronyu took a deep breath. Then, he took a step forward and entered the world of lightning. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk as soon as Muronyu appeared in the Blue Thunder Valley, waves of terrifying lightning poured down, instantly drowning Muronyu. However, this was only the lightning in the periphery of the Blue Thunder Valley. It was not comparable to the Holy Tribulation when one ascended from the God Realm to the Holy Realm. Therefore, Muronyu stood where he was without moving, allowing the lightning to strike him. However, Muronyu was not injured at all. Muronyu stood where he was and looked towards the depths of the Blue Thunder Valley. At the same time, his divine sense, which was as vast as an ocean, spread out and extended toward the Blue Thunder Valley. However, it was just as he had expected. His spiritual sense was not able to cover a large area before it was turned to dust by the lightning. These lightning bolts were capable of shattering even spiritual will. This made Muronyu depressed. Previously, Lu Xiankai had mentioned that Muronyu's Infernal Order Medallion was placed in Blue Thunder Valley by his master's great ability. The identity token could be at the entrance of the Blue Thunder Valley. It could also be in the depths of the Blue Thunder Valley. Of course, Muronyu also knew that the identity token could not be placed in the depths of the Blue Thunder Valley. This was because Muronyu did not have the ability to obtain it. In other words, the identity medallion could appear anywhere within the range of Muronyu's ability. Moreover, the identity token was not hidden in any way. Even mortals could see it. However, Blue Thunder Valley was simply too big. If Muronyu could extend his divine sense, he would have been able to find his identity medallion as easily as blowing off dust. However, since he could not extend his spiritual sense, he could only rely on his eyes. If the Blue Thunder Valley was an ordinary place, 10 years would be enough for Muronyu to make a name for himself here. However, this place was filled with danger. 10 years seemed like a long time, but it was rather tight. There is only one chance. If I can't find the identity token in 10 years, I will have no fate with the Seamless Sect. Muronyu thought. Then, his expression gradually became firm. In the next moment, he took a step and disappeared from where he was. However, he did not go too deep. Because the identity token could appear in the periphery of the Blue Thunder Valley, he planned to start from the periphery of the Blue Thunder Valley. Muronyu's spiritual force could still extend to a certain range when he was in the periphery of the Blue Thunder Valley. So his speed was of the Blue Thunder Valley. However, as he went deeper and deeper, the area that his spiritual force could cover became smaller and smaller, and his speed became slower and slower. Of Muronyu of God, of the Blue Thunder, of Thunder the Thunder, and Lightning of the Lightning. Only of Xiongyu of Heaven, of gods, of minds of the Thunder. Rumble, bolts of lightning as thick as water buckets came crashing down, but when they came in contact with Muronyu's body, they disappeared in a flash. Muronyu's lightning saint godhead had swallowed them. With Muronyu's current strength, he needed to devour a lot of energy to raise his cultivation. Although the lightning energy was not as pure as refining saint artifacts, it was better than nothing. Moreover, the lightning energy was extremely violent. It could be used to temper one's physical body. Muronyu had already reached the imperishable realm, but his physical body was still at the level of a low-grade saint artifact, which was a little low. However, it was more difficult to raise one's physical body. Swoosh! A black shadow leaped out from the side. It tore through the void and pounced on Muronyu. It was a fierce beast that had the appearance of a leopard, but it was the size of an elephant. However, it was different from ordinary fierce beasts. These fierce beasts that lived in the Blue Thunder Valley were born with the ability to control lightning. The Thunderbolt beast's body flickered with lightning, and its mouth spewed out lightning that emitted a destructive aura as it pounced toward Muronyu. Muronyu snorted coldly. He did not dodge. Instead, he punched out. Boom! After an earth-shattering explosion, the lightning beast exploded into pieces. It was just an imperishable realm, fierce beast. It posed no threat to Murongyu. On the contrary, Murongyu obtained a soul fragment and a fierce beast's crystal core. Of course, this was only for Murongyu. If it was an ordinary imperishable realm sage, or even a profound sage, they would not dare to fight with this lightning beast. After all, the lightning of a lightning beast was much stronger than its strength. After an ordinary sage entered this place, most of their strength was used to defend against the lightning outside. How could they resist the lightning of a lightning beast? Only Murongyu, who was not afraid of lightning, could do so. As he went deeper and deeper, the lightning became more and more powerful. He kept encountering stronger and stronger lightning beasts, but Murongyu's speed was getting slower and slower. A year passed. At this time, Murongyu had already gone deep into the Blue Thunder Valley. The strength of the lightning beasts had reached the ancient sage realm. However, what made Murongyu a little relieved was that although these lightning beasts were powerful, there were not many of them. Often, he would not encounter one for many days. However, the power of the lightning stopped Murongyu from doing so. Now, most of his strength was used to resist the bombardment of lightning. Moreover, he did not dare to directly absorb the power of lightning. This was because his physical body had reached the limit of what it could bear. If he directly swallowed it, his physical body would be blown to pieces. It's not a problem to go deeper, but only to a certain extent. If I want to go deeper, I need to be stronger and have a stronger physical body, especially the strength of my physical body. Now that the power of lightning is so strong that it can even help me break through to the second level of the undead realm. However, I need my physical body to be able to withstand the power of lightning before I can continue to absorb it. The lightning here is enough to temper my physical body. Murongyu pondered for a moment, then took a step forward. After advancing for another 100 miles, Murongyu sat down cross-legged on the ground. What is Murongyu doing? While Murongyu was sitting cross-legged on the ground, a bewildered voice came from a mountain peak not far from the Blue Thunder Valley. If Murongyu was here, he would definitely recognize that the person who spoke was Lu Xiankai, one of the disciples of the Never-Ending Path. There were two people beside Lu Xiankai. One of them was a middle-aged man with a height of 2 zhang and a beard. The other was a 15 or 16-year-old youth with a childlike face. The middle-aged man with a beard was also the number 1 disciple of the Never-Ending Path. His name was Huyening Hao. The 15 or 16-year-old youth with a childlike face was Lu Xiankai and Lu Xiankai's junior brother, Wu Xinshui. While Lu Xiankai was speaking, Huyening Hao and Wu Xinshui were also looking at Murongyu, their faces showing surprise and confusion. It seems he is cultivating? The childlike Wu Xinshui said with some hesitation. This guy is a bit interesting. He is becoming more and more to my liking. I wonder if he can pass the test. The bearded Huyen Hao chuckled. 8th senior brother, you have said this many times. It seems that ever since Master decided to take Murongyu into the sect, you have been saying it. Could it be that you have a special fetish that we have not discovered? Lu Xiankai turned to look at Huyen Hao. As he spoke, he involuntarily took a step back. When Lu Xiankai took a step back, Wu Xinshui, who was originally beside Huyen Hao, also took a step back, increasing the distance between him and Huyen Hao. You two brats, are you itching for a beating? Huyen Hao glared at Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui, but he did not mind and smiled. At the same time, he said, Murongyu is a talent. In addition, he dared to kill the disciples of the Merit Hall and Punishment Hall in the Merit Hall of the True Martial Temple, and then betrayed the True Martial Temple. This courage, this decisiveness, how many people in the world have it? If it were you, would you betray the True Martial Temple? Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui looked at each other, then shook their heads with some hesitation. Although they were geniuses among geniuses, they did not dare to guarantee that they would have Murong use decisiveness. After all, once they betrayed the True Martial Temple, they would not be able to use the various resources of the True Martial Temple, and they would also have to face the pursuit of the True Martial Temple. This was not something that ordinary people would dare to do. In the world, how many people dreamed of becoming a disciple of the true martial temple? Even if they were suppressed in the true martial temple, they could only swallow their anger. And they did not dare to speak out? It's definitely our loss if this kid doesn't join the infernal organization. Huyen Inghao continued. Senior brother, don't worry. Master also appreciates him. Murong, you will definitely find his identity token. Wu Xinshui said lightly. Huyen Inghao's face was already dark, but now it was even darker. Back then, Seven Senior Brother and the others also said that Master appreciates me very much, but in the end, I was almost unable to join the infernal organization. Master's thoughts are not something that we can understand. Huyen Inghao said with a dark face. Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui nodded. Then Wu Xinshui continued. However, I always feel that Master will not let a talent that he appreciates leave. Just like 8th Senior Brother. Huyen Inghao nodded with a dark face, no longer speaking, and continued to look at Murong Yu. This kid is really cultivating. He is not seizing the time to find his identity token, but is cultivating instead. This is really infuriating. 8th Senior Brother, sharpening the axe will not delay the work of cutting firewood. If he becomes stronger, he can go deeper. Murong Yu knows this better than any of us. Lu Xiankai said, 8th Senior Brother, this is called the Emperor is not anxious, but the eunuch is. Murong Yu is not anxious, so why are you anxious? Wu Xinshui said with a smile. Huyen Inghao's face became even darker. Chapter 14:16. Sitting cross-legged in the depths of Blue Thunder Valley, Murong Yu suddenly opened his eyes and thought to himself, just a little bit more, and I'll break through. It had been 5 years since he first entered Blue Thunder Valley. During these 5 years, Murong Yu had continuously devoured the lightning energy in Blue Thunder Valley. While tempering his body, he had also cultivated his cultivation. During this process, Murong Yu's body had already reached the peak of the low-grade Sacred Tool rank. He was only half a step away from breaking through to the middle-grade Sacred Tool rank. Because Murong Yu had used most of his power to temper his body, his cultivation had not made any obvious progress. However, he had already reached the peak of the first level of the undead stage. However, although Murong Yu had already traveled quite a distance into Blue Thunder Valley during these 5 years, he had not deliberately searched for his identity tablet. It seemed that he did not care about the Seamless Agencies test, but rather focused on increasing his own strength. This kid is really depressing. He wasted 5 years just like that. In the distance, Huyen Inghao, who had a full beard on his face, spoke in a somewhat resentful tone. He wanted nothing more than to rush into Blue Thunder Valley and capture Murong Yu to find his identity tablet. Hearing this, Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui rolled their eyes. Originally, the two of them did not want to pay any attention to Huyen Inghao. However, Wu Xinshui still rolled her eyes and said, 8th Senior Brother, in these 5 years, you've already said this 108,000 times. Huyen Inghao's face darkened. Did I? Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui nodded repeatedly. Huyen Inghao immediately smiled embarrassedly and scratched his head. He turned to look at Murong Yu and could not help but say, it's just that this guy is really not making any progress. Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui could not help but hold their foreheads with their hands. They were really speechless towards Huyen Inghao. However, they also understood Huyen Inghao's feelings. Before this, they had already investigated everything about Murong Yu, including whether he had ascended from the God Realm, whether he was a pill refining genius, and so on. Don't ask how the Seamless Agency found out. They naturally had their ways. They all knew that Murong Yu was a genius, but hearing about it and seeing it for themselves were two completely different things. In the past 5 years, they'd personally witnessed Murong Yu's strength rapidly growing. Physical body and cultivation strength, advancing from early First Order Imperishable Realm to peak Imperishable Realm in 5 years. This speed was absolutely heaven-defying. Even they didn't have this kind of speed when they were at this level. What's more, Murong Yu's improvement in his physical body surprised them even more. This was especially true for Huyin Yinghao, whose physical body was extremely powerful. It could even be said that they specialized in cultivating the physical body. Among the disciples of the Infernal Society, he was the only one who cultivated his physical body. Because of all these reasons, he liked Murong Yu even more. When he saw that Murong Yu was not thinking about making progress, of course, he felt a little resentful that Murong Yu did not meet his expectations. 8th Senior Brother, you must remember that sharpening the knife will not delay the work of cutting firewood. Lu Xiankai rolled his eyes and said. While they were talking, Murong Yu had already stepped forward and walked deeper into Blue Thunder Valley. Finally, after reaching the limit of what his physical body could bear, he sat down cross-legged again. Time passed, year after year. In the blink of an eye, it had already been 8 years since Murong Yu entered Blue Thunder Valley. There were less than 2 years left until the 10-year deadline. At this time, not only was Huyin Yinghao anxious, but even Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui were starting to feel anxious. One must know that with their strength, they were not confident that they could find Murong Yu's identity token in 2 years, let alone Murong Yu. However, looking at Murong Yu's calm appearance, Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui both gnashed their teeth in hatred, feeling the same as Huyin Yinghao. Boom! Just as they were feeling anxious, a muffled explosion rang out from Murong Yu's body in Blue Thunder Valley. Of course, in Murong Yu's heart, this sound was extremely loud, but Lu Xiankai and the others did not notice it. They only saw Murong Yu's body tremble violently, followed by an extremely powerful aura erupting from his body. In fact, Murong Yu was still sitting cross-legged in the same place and did not move. However, Huyin Yinghao and the other two knew that the current Murong Yu was no longer on the same level as the previous Murong Yu. Murong Yu was still Murong Yu, but his physical body was dozens of times stronger than before, or even hundreds of times stronger. His physical body is at the level of a medium sacred artifact. Huyin Yinghao's face flashed with a hint of surprise and excitement. His physical body is even stronger than ours. Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui were depressed. However, they were only depressed for a moment and were not dissatisfied in other aspects. After all, they were not cultivators who cultivated their physical bodies. Moreover, Murong Yu might be a disciple of the Infernal Society and was about to become their junior brother. Of course, they hoped that Murong Yu would be as strong as possible. Boom! Just as Murong Yu's physical body broke through to the level of a medium sacred artifact, Murong Yu's body trembled again, and then a black holy light penetrated his body. In the eyes of Huyin Yinghao and the other two, Murong Yu's cultivation had risen from the undead stage first level to the undead stage second level. His physical body and cultivation had broken through at the same time. This kid is truly a monstrous genius. Huyin Yinghao laughed, looking very happy. Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui were also beaming with joy. Huyin Yinghao and the other two were happy, but Murong Yu was even happier. It had been many days since he ascended to the holy world, and his physical body had finally broken through. And after a few years, his cultivation had risen by another minor realm. With my current strength, it's not a problem for me to take on a saint of the middle stage or below. Even if I don't use my soul attack or the power of time, I'm confident that I can kill a middle stage ancient saint. If I use my soul attack and the power of time, it's not impossible for me to kill a high stage ancient saint. And if I use my supreme weapon, the purple radiant heavenly Civ Pagoda, I can even kill a first level holy king. At this moment, Murong Yu was bursting with confidence. He could not help but want to leave Blue Thunder Valley and fight a high-stage ancient saint. However, these were only his thoughts. Murong Yu knew the severity of the matter. Wasn't it easy to fight a battle? His enemies were all over the world. As long as he went to a city and shouted, "I am Murong Yu," countless people would shout and charge at him. Now it's time to look for an identity token. There's still more than a year's time. Time is of the essence. As he spoke, Moronyu had already soared into the sky and flew out of Blue Thunder Valley. Is this kid thinking of leaving Blue Thunder Valley? Has he given up? Seeing Morongyu's actions, Huyin Hao was suddenly stunned. I don't think so. He should be looking for an identity token now. He should be starting from the outer area. Lu Xiankai said. As expected, Moronyu stopped when he reached the place where he first cultivated. Then he started to walk in circles, shrinking in circles, looking for an identity token. However, what made Moronyu depressed was that when he found the place where he broke through, he still found nothing. The difficulty of this test is many times higher than the true martial temple. If I can't break through, this is already the limit I can enter. Could it be that the leader of the Infernal Society predicted that I would break through and go deeper? If that's the case, he's too scary. He's simply a prophet. Step in. After Morongyu's strength increased, he could go deeper. However, the deeper he went, the more terrifying the power of the lightning became. In the end, the incomparably strong pressure suppressed Morongyu to the point that he couldn't move. His divine sense couldn't be extended. Suddenly, there was only 1 year left. Master couldn't have placed Morongyu's identity token in the depths of Blue Thunder Valley, right? Morongyu's current location is an area where even ordinary high-level holy kings wouldn't dare to take half a step into. Seeing that time was constantly passing and Morongyu still hadn't found his identity token, Huyin Hao was suddenly a little anxious. It shouldn't be, right? Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui looked at each other. Then Lu Xiankai continued, We have to believe in Master. I think Master does have the intention to take Morongyu in. Huyin Hao nodded. He was the same at that time. He only found his identity token at the last moment. In fact, these disciples of the Infernal Society had similar experiences. Presumably, Morongyu wouldn't be an exception. Only half a year left. Morongyu's face was a little gloomy. Now, it was almost difficult for him to move. Even taking a step forward was difficult. 3 months, 2 months, 1 month. When there was only 1 month left, Morongyu's footsteps suddenly stopped. Then, a hint of joy appeared on his face. Just 100 miles in front of him, something similar to a token appeared in his line of sight. It was exactly the same as Lu Xiankai's identity token that Morongyu saw. That's my identity medallion. As long as I successfully obtain this token, I will be an official disciple of the Infernal Society. Morongyu's eyes shone brightly. His face was full of smiles. Morongyu has discovered his identity medallion. However, he's still 100 miles away. With his current speed, it won't be easy for him to cross this distance in a month. Outside Blue Thunder Valley, Huyin Hao and the other two frowned. Even so, they didn't think of helping Morongyu. With their strength, helping Morongyu cross that 100 miles would be as easy as turning over their hands. However, if they did that, it would be against the rules. That way, even if Morongyu obtained his identity token, he wouldn't be able to become a disciple of the Infernal Society, because they couldn't hide it from their omnipotent master. Just how strong was their master? In their hearts, he was an unfathomable existence. Chapter 14:17. Huyin Hao and the others were anxious for Morongyu. But as the person in question, Morongyu was even more anxious when he saw the identity token of a never-ending underworld disciple that was so close to him. As long as he obtained the identity token, he would be considered to have passed the entrance examination of the never-ending underworld and become a never-ending underworld disciple. Because the never-ending underworld had very few disciples, it was different from the true martial temple. There was no distinction between the outer palace and the inner palace. The never-ending underworld only had official disciples, and there was only a hierarchy of who had entered the sect. There was no outer palace or inner palace, and there were no holy sons or holy daughters. Thus, as long as Morongyu obtained the identity token, he would be able to enjoy the same treatment as Lu Xiankai and the others. In the outside holy world, 50 kilometers was not considered a distance at all. But now it was so close yet so far. Morongyu did not hesitate. He took a step forward and walked toward the identity token. Boom! After taking a step forward, the power of lightning poured down and bombarded Murongyu's body. Morongyu had already taken out the Hichu Luoshu and transformed it into a set of clothes. Moreover, his physical body had already reached the level of a mid-grade Saint artifact. Thus, the incomparably violent power that bombarded his body did not have any actual effect on him. However, in addition to the lightning, there was also a powerful and terrifying pressure that descended from the sky and fiercely suppressed Murongyu's body. Immediately, Morongyu felt as if he was being suppressed by an ancient sacred mountain. Caught off guard, his waist was pressed down until it bent. Humph! Morongyu coldly snorted. The power in his body surged like a stormy sea and then exploded out. Immediately, the pressure was shaken out and the pressure on Morongyu was relieved. Whoosh! Taking advantage of this opportunity, Murongyu's figure flashed, and he continuously took a few steps forward, crossing a distance of 10 kilometers. However, when he steadied himself, an even greater pressure than before pressed down on him. You could only raise his strength to the limit and forcibly resist this pressure. Like before, he took the opportunity to take a few steps forward. However, he did not manage to cross 5 kilometers this time. It was only 5 miles away. The deeper he went, the greater the pressure. For kilometers, 3 kilometers, 1 kilometer, 100 steps. In the end, Morongyu once again found it difficult to move. Every step he took was not even as far as a normal step. After Murongyu's great efforts, he was only 1 mile away from the identity medallion. At this moment, even the strength of drinking milk gushed out of him. Apart from the purple light, heavenly Civ Pagoda, he also took out all sorts of treasures. It was because of this that he had come here. However, in the following year, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't cross it, unless he unleashed the might of the heavenly purple pagoda. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to continue forward. However, the purple radiance heavenly roving pagoda was a supreme artifact after all. Once it was used, Lu Xiankai and the others would definitely know. Moreover, other than Lu Xiankai and the others, there were many other experts who would be alarmed. The others would not be affected. As long as Morongyu obtained the identity medallion, he would keep the heavenly purple light, heavenly Civ Pagoda in his body and quickly leave this place. Even the primal Chaos Ancestor Sage would not be able to discover that he was the one who unleashed the supreme weapon. However, what if Lu Xiankai and the others found out? Morongyu did not know that Lu Xiankai and the others were watching him from outside Blue Thunder Valley. However, he knew that Lu Xiankai definitely did not leave. Could the disciples of the Infernal Society be trusted? Would Lu Xiankai really not be greedy after discovering his supreme weapon? Or would he leak out the fact that he had a supreme weapon? However, if he did not unleash the heavenly purple light, heavenly Civ Pagoda, he would not be able to obtain the identity medallion. Could it be that I have to make a choice? This thought suddenly flashed through Murongyu's mind. Could it be that the leader of the Infernal Society already knew that I had the heavenly purple light, heavenly Civ Pagoda? Did he calculate that I would only obtain the identity medallion after I unleashed the heavenly purple light, heavenly Civ Pagoda? Should I unleash the heavenly purple light, heavenly Civ Pagoda to obtain the identity medallion of the Infernal Society, or retreat? Morongyu muttered to himself. Outside Blue Thunder Valley, seeing Morongyu in a daze in front of the identity medallion, so close to him, Huyin Hao and the others were somewhat anxious. They really wanted to help Morongyu obtain the identity medallion that belonged to him. Morongyu should still have a trump card. When we were taking the test, we were also forced to reveal our trump cards before we narrowly passed. Lu Xiankai suddenly said. Huyin Hao and Wu Xinshui were stunned for a moment before they reacted. It seemed that their tests were all like this. What other trump cards does Morongyu have? He is definitely at the end of his rope now. Huyin Hao suddenly laughed with an expectant look. Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui were the same. Boom! Just as they were looking forward to it, Morong Yu finally made up his mind and unleashed the heavenly purple light, heavenly Civ Pagoda. At the same time, he poured a vast amount of energy into the heavenly purple light, heavenly Civ Pagoda. After a dull, thunder-like explosion, a dazzling, five-colored holy light burst out from the heavenly purple light, heavenly Civ Pagoda. It soared into the sky and quickly dissipated in all directions. In less than 1/100th of a second, the five-colored holy light had already submerged the entire Blue Thunder Valley. Moreover, it swept towards an even wider area like a tide. Five-colored holy light. That's a supreme weapon. When they saw the five-colored holy light that filled the sky and the pressure that could frighten the soul, Huan Yinghao, Lu Xiankai, and Wu Xinshui couldn't help but change their expressions. At the same time, they couldn't help but cry out in alarm. At the same time, Morong Yu felt that the entire Blue Thunder Valley seemed to be under the pressure of the supreme weapon, and its power seemed to have weakened by 1,000 times. The pressure on Morong Yu's body suddenly disappeared. He didn't waste this opportunity. When the pressure suddenly disappeared, he had already taken a step forward and appeared in front of the identity token. Then he stretched out his hand and grabbed the identity token in the air. Whoosh! Without any other accidents, the identity token immediately turned into a stream of light and was caught in his hand. Then he put it away in the Hichu Luoshu world. Rumble! It was also at this moment that the power that erupted from the heavenly purple light, heavenly Civ Pagoda, seemed to have been shattered by the Blue Thunder Valley. A terrifying aura that could destroy the heavens and the earth pressed down on him. Morong Yu laughed. His figure instantly retreated, smashing through the void and shuttling through the void. The speed at which he left was countless times faster than the speed at which he entered. When the Blue Thunder Valley returned to normal, Morong Yu had already appeared outside the Blue Thunder Valley, as if nothing had happened. Those lightning bolts could no longer cause any harm to him. However, Morong Yu still let out a deep breath, and his heart that had been worried all this time was completely put down. A bright smile also appeared on his face. Morong Yu's harvest from this trip to the Blue Thunder Valley could be said to be huge. Not to mention the upgrade of his physical body from a low-grade sacred tool to a mid-grade sacred tool, and the increase of his cultivation. Even if it was just these two gains, Morong Yu was already pleasantly surprised. Furthermore, Morong Yu had also obtained his secret agent's identity token. Now, Morong Yu could be said to be half a spy. Becoming a spy was completely different from becoming a disciple of the true martial temple. Although the two sects were one of the 10 great cultivation holy lands of the human race, and the true martial temple was the head of the 10 holy lands on the surface. Everyone wanted to join the true martial temple. The threshold for joining the true martial temple was extremely high. At the very least, one had to be at the imperishable realm and pass the true martial temple's test to be able to join. However, although the threshold for joining the true martial temple was high, there were still a large number of people who joined each time they recruited disciples. The threshold was actually not high. Compared to the infernal Tao, the true martial temple's threshold was nothing. The spy was the most mysterious holy land of the 10 great holy lands. In terms of individual strength, the spy's disciples definitely surpassed the true martial temple. Most importantly, there were countless people who wanted to join the seamless agency. However, the spy agency almost never accepted disciples. There was only one way to become a never-ending path disciple, and that was to pass the spy agency's test. However, not everyone was qualified to take the spy agency's test. Everyone who wanted to take the test had to receive an invitation from the spy agency. Just like Morong Yu. Apart from Morong Yu, all the spy agency's disciples were the same. One could take the test after reaching the imperishable realm, while the other could only take the test after receiving an invitation. It went without saying which of the two had a higher threshold. Whoosh! When Morong Yu appeared outside Blue Thunder Valley, Huyan Yinghao and the other two heaved a sigh of relief, as if they were the ones involved. 10th Junior Brother, I'll leave the matter of bringing Morong Yu back to the sect to you. Junior Brother Wu and I are going to complete a mission. Hu Yanninghao first smiled at Lu Xiankai, then a cold, killing intent flashed through his eyes. Then, he and Wu Xinshui's figures flickered and disappeared. Clearly, the mission they were going to complete was no ordinary mission. Lu Xiankai stepped into the air and landed next to Murongyu, a smile on his face as he said, "Congratulations, 18th junior brother." "Senior brother Lu? You're joking. I haven't officially joined the spy agency yet," Murongyu said with some embarrassment. As he spoke, he also observed Lu Xiankai. However, he didn't find anything strange on Lu Xiankai's face. Lu Xiankai shook his head and smiled. "From the moment you received your identity medallion, you were already a spy, unless you don't want to join the spy agency." At this point, Lu Xiankai muttered to himself for a moment, then continued, 18th junior brother, as your senior brother, let me warn you. It's fine if you expose your supreme weapon in front of us. We won't have any strange thoughts. However, you must not expose it in front of outsiders. Otherwise, you'll be in danger. Remember this. Chapter 14:18. Yu's face darkened. Lu Bingxin glared fiercely at Wu Xinshui with a murderous look. "Wu Xinshui, try saying that again." Wu Xinshui curled her lips, her face full of disdain. "I'm too lazy to talk to a love-struck fool like you. I'm not interested." All right. You two don't act like quarrelsome lovers, bickering whenever you see each other. You're making a fool of yourself in front of junior brother." Lu Xiankai glared at the two and smiled at Murongyu with some embarrassment. Murongyu also smiled. "It's fine. You can continue to treat me as if I don't exist." Wu Xinshui and Lu Bingxin glared fiercely at each other, then snorted coldly and turned their heads away, no longer speaking. Clearly, they felt a little embarrassed. In 3 days, all the disciples of the infernal sect had returned. The petite third senior sister, Shima Ningming, and the beautiful but very shrewish 9th senior sister, Li Xinyan. The indifferent and ice-cold 13th disciple, Yin Gaoan. In less than 3 days, all the other disciples of the infernal society had returned, except for their master, who was as elusive as a dragon that moved in and out of sight. These disciples all had different personalities. Some were passionate, some were cold, and some were arrogant. However, these were just their outward appearances. In reality, Murongyu felt that they were very harmonious with each other, unlike the other sects that were filled with war and strife. Was this the truth? Murongyu still didn't know. However, this was the feeling they gave him. Moreover, among these disciples, there were a few who had never spoken a word to Murongyu. However, Murongyu also felt that they didn't reject him or look down on him. It was just their personalities. In their hearts, they had accepted him. Moreover, Murongyu also found that the dark-skinned man, 8th senior brother Hu Yanninghao, liked him the most. Of course, this kind of wasn't ambiguous. In addition to their personalities, Murongyu also found that they were very powerful. Apart from him and Wu Xinshui, the others were at least at the primal chaos ancestor saint level. Wu Xinshui had also reached the peak of the ancestor saint realm. One sect had 17 disciples, and 16 of them had reached the primal chaos ancestral saint level. Moreover, Murongyu could vaguely feel that the strength of Lu Xiankai and the others was definitely not something that could be compared to any expert of the same level outside. In the outside world, each of them was a powerhouse who dominated a region. However, Murongyu was not depressed. As long as he had enough time, he could reach the same level as them. Moreover, he believed that he would surpass every single one of them. Hu Yanninghao and the others were all monstrous geniuses. However, they were not chaos celestial bodies, so they could not become chaos controllers. As long as Murongyu became the chaos controller, he would be the strongest in the world. Lu Xiankai and the others rarely saw each other. Now that they were all gathered together, they all started chatting. Murongyu didn't give him the cold shoulder either. He chatted with him from time to time. Suddenly, Murongyu caught a glimpse of a figure from the corner of his eye. It was a middle-aged man with an ordinary face. Murongyu was shocked. because that middle-aged man wasn't any disciple of the infernal society. Moreover, Moronyu hadn't seen him just a moment ago. But the next moment, he appeared there. Not only that, the middle-aged man also gave Moronyu a feeling of ancientness. It was as if he hadn't just appeared in this place, but had been here for a long time, existing all this time. It was just that he couldn't see him. Other than that, Moronyu didn't find anything strange about this middle-aged man. The only thing that was strange was that he was like an ordinary man in the secular world. There were no fluctuations of power, nor was there any light of power. Master. After Moronyu discovered this middle-aged man, Lu Xiankai and the others also discovered him. Therefore, one by one, they bowed to the middle-aged man with incomparable respect. Although Moronyu didn't call him master, he still bowed. This middle-aged man's strength was definitely stronger than anyone present. It was as if he had already returned to his original state. This middle-aged man was the head of the infernal society. Infernal. Infernal nodded slightly, a satisfied smile on his face. Then, his gaze fell on Moronyu. Moronyu, are you willing to join my infernal society? Acknowledge me as your master? His voice was gentle and kind. Hearing this, Moronyu felt like a spring breeze in his heart. Moronyu was startled. For a moment, he didn't answer. Moronyu, what are you doing? Why aren't you answering Master's question? Lu Bingxin jabbed Moronyu's arm and glared at him. Only then did Moronyu react. He said with some hesitation, just like this? Infernal nodded. Our infernal society is simple. You only need to kowtow 3 times to complete the ceremony of acknowledging me as your master. Moronyu blushed with shame in his heart. Given infernal status, if it were anyone else, they would definitely announce to the world that they wanted to accept a disciple. Then, they would hold an incomparably grand ceremony. However, when he thought about the few rooms in the infernal society, Moronyu understood. Moreover, he liked to keep things simple. He didn't like excessive formalities. Immediately, Moronyu laughed. He quickly knelt down and kowtowed 3 times to Infernal. This seemed to be the first time Moronyu had kowtowed. However, he was willing to kowtow. All this time, other than the fallen Zhao Yun, he hadn't acknowledged anyone as his master. He had always been striving. Infernal strength was strong enough to be his master. Moreover, if he wanted to become a disciple of the infernal society, he had to acknowledge a master. After all, the holy world was 1,000,000 times crueler than the immortal world and God world. Without a powerful backer, Moronyu couldn't even protect himself, let alone Yu Mengqing and the others. Moreover, Moronyu had Shenzhen behind him. Good. From today onwards, Moronyu, you are my 18th and final disciple. A smile appeared on Infernal's face. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and pointed a finger at Moronyu. A stream of light tore through the void and directly affected Moronyu's body. This is one of my powers. However, because this is only an avatar of mine, it isn't very strong. However, it can allow you to withstand 3 full-powered attacks from the primal Chaos Ancestor Sage. Just an avatar's power was so terrifying, Moronyu was shocked. Could it be that Infernal was in existence on the level of a supreme? In his ecstasy, Moronyu hurriedly expressed his thanks. Infernal waved his hand and continued, "All right, you are all my disciples. You are as close as family. Moronyu's strength is still low. As his senior brothers, you should help him. Moronyu, if you don't understand, you can ask your senior brothers. If you encounter any difficulties, don't be shy to ask." Zhong Mingji, from now on, Moronyu's authority is the same as yours. He can use any resources of the Infernal Agency. All right, my true body is still fighting outside. I can't be distracted for too long. Before he could finish his words, Wu Jian's avatar disappeared without a trace. Outside, Moronyu didn't find it strange that he received the same treatment as the other disciples. It was Infernal's words that made him leave. "Eighth senior brother, what is the outside? Who is master fighting in the outer realm?" Moronyu turned to look at the bearded Huyaning Hao and asked, "You will know when your strength reaches a certain level. Now is not the time. Knowing won't do you any good. Hu Yinninghao said with a smile. Morong was speechless. Could it be the battle outside, the holy world with the desolates? It is said that some powerful desolates are not even Supreme's opponents. All right, junior brother. This is not something you should know now. This is my token. If you encounter any difficulties, such as being hunted down, you can use my token to contact me directly. Of course, I can also contact you directly through the token. So, don't lose this token. Lu Bingxin handed a jade slip that looked like an identity token to Morong Yu. Then, her figure flashed and disappeared from the hall. Junior brother, this is my token. After Lu Bingxin, Morong Yu and the other disciples of the Infernal Agency handed their tokens to Morong Yu and left the hall. They either went to cultivate or left the Infernal Agency. Before this, if they weren't cultivating, they were doing something else. They were able to return because Morong Yu wanted to become a disciple. In the end, only Lu Xiankai, Hu Yinninghao, Wu Xinxue, and Morong Yu were left in the hall. Everyone else had left. Lu Xiankai didn't leave because he wanted to guide Morong Yu to familiarize himself with the Infernal Agency. Hu Yinninghao and Wu Xinxue had already completed a mission and didn't have anything to do for the time being. Morong Yu, keep these tokens well. If you encounter any difficulties, come to us directly. Every single one of us will help you. Of course, if we encounter any difficulties, we will also come to you for help. So, don't treat us as outsiders. Lu Xiankai said with a smile. With a smile on his face, Morong Yu stored the tokens into He Tu and Luo Shu. With so many free super experts as bodyguards, I'd be letting you guys down if I didn't use them. Junior brother, don't be too careless. The holy world is too big. Even if we receive your message, if we are too far away, it will be impossible for us to reach you immediately. So, you still need to be careful. All right, we are all smart people. We know what to do. Junior brother, we will now bring you to our Infernal Agency's library, treasury, etc. You can also build your own hall in the Infernal Agency. You can choose any place you want. Is that okay? Why don't I see your hall? Morong Yu was a little tempted. We're used to being lazy. Cultivating anywhere is still cultivating. Hu Yinninghao laughed and soared into the air, leaving the hall. Then Morong Yu and the other two also soared into the air and walked towards the library. Chapter 1419. The Three Supreme Weapons. Although the Seamless Paths Library looked like a very ordinary building, it was still a very ordinary building. However, it was a completely different space inside. When Morong Yu stepped in, he was immediately shocked. Morong Yu had never entered the true Martial Temple's library, so he didn't know what it was like. However, the Infernal Society's library had completely shocked him. If he had to describe it with one word, it would be huge. It was a vast and boundless space with no end in sight. And in this incomparably huge space, there was an incomparably huge bookshelf standing tall. Each bookshelf was filled with books. At a glance, the books were like grains of sand in the Ganges, innumerable. Are these all cultivation techniques? Morong Yu was shocked for a moment. Then he suppressed the shock in his heart and asked Lu Xiankai and the others. Hu Yinninghao laughed. Of course not. In addition to cultivation techniques, there are all kinds of battle skills, secret techniques, and even more. There are also astronomy, geography, introductions to other races' various secret areas, and so on. Although it was called a library, it was like an encyclopedia with everything one wanted. This was the foundation of the Holy World's super sections. Other sects, no matter how powerful they were, would definitely not have so many related books. Even if Shenzhen became one of the biggest sects in the Holy World, it would definitely not be on the scale of the Infernal Society. This was because these books were collected by the Infernal Society after countless years. These books, can I read as much as I want? Of course you can. However, junior brother, as the saying goes, don't bite off more than you can chew. I don't recommend that you ask for too many cultivation techniques. Just choose the right one and focus on it. More cultivation techniques may not be beneficial. Lu Xiankai looked at Murong Yu and said with a serious expression. Murong Yu nodded. He naturally understood this principle. The reason why he asked this question was actually not to learn any cultivation techniques. He could only cultivate the chaotic celestial body records. Apart from this cultivation technique, he couldn't cultivate anything else. Even if he wanted to find cultivation techniques, Murong Yu would only look for battle skills. But then again, Hichu also knew a lot of cultivation techniques, enough for Murong Yu, Mu Liyue, and the others to cultivate. Murong Yu only wanted to read books on astronomy and geography, as well as the introduction to the various secret zones, danger zones, and holy clans in the holy world. As long as you have the identity medallion of a seamless society disciple, you can enter the library to read. However, these books could not be taken out of the library. Of course, you can also memorize some books and let others cultivate them. In this regard, our seamless society is quite open-minded. Murong Yu nodded. This was even better. Today, I'll bring you to the Tool Hall and Medicine Hall to take a look. It won't be too late for you to come to the library pavilion to read when you have time. Murong Yu and the others left the library pavilion and arrived at the Tool Hall. The artifact hall was filled with all kinds of saint artifacts, magic treasures, and similar treasures. Rumble. As soon as Murong Yu stepped into the artifact hall, an aura as vast as the ocean rolled over. With a kacha sound, Murong Yu felt as if he was being suppressed by a sacred mountain. His body could not help but be pressed down. The aura of a supreme artifact. His aura was incomparably powerful. However, the familiar aura caused Murong Yu to be startled. Only a supreme artifact could emit such an aura, and it was similar to the purple radiant heavenly roar pagoda in his hand. However, it was even more powerful than the purple radiant heavenly roar pagoda. Although the purple radiant heavenly roar pagoda was also a supreme artifact, it was incomplete. Murong Yu felt that the supreme artifact in the seamless artifact hall was very likely to be complete. As expected, when Murong Yu looked forward, he saw bursts of five-colored saint light constantly flickering, filling the entire artifact hall. Under the suppression of the supreme artifact, although there were many powerful saint artifacts in the artifact hall, the light of these saint artifacts and magic treasures were all suppressed. It looked as if there was only one supreme artifact in the entire artifact hall. However, Murong Yu quickly came to his senses. The Seamless Sect was one of the 10 great cultivation sanctuaries of the human clan. It was normal for them to have a supreme artifact as their sect treasure. However, soon, Murong Yu's face was filled with shock and hesitation. He carefully sensed that there was more than one supreme artifact's aura in the artifact hall. There seemed to be 2 or 3 of them. It was said that among the 10 great cultivation sanctuaries of the human clan, only the true martial temple and the unparalleled palace had supremes. They were the true martial temple and the unparalleled palace. These 2 supremes were also the only 2 supremes of the human clan. It was because of these 2 supremes that the demon clan and the sacred clan were intimidated. Otherwise, the sacred clan would have invaded the human clan long ago. The other 8 great cultivation sanctuaries did not have supremes at all. They only had supreme artifacts. Only, with how powerful supreme beings were, there weren't that many since the ancient times, and the number of people who died was even fewer. Naturally, there were very few supreme artifacts. It should be known that if a super sect had a supreme artifact in good condition, it would become a sect treasure. Then, it would become a cultivation sanctuary. Other than the unparalleled palace and the true martial temple, each sanctuary only had one supreme artifact as their sect treasure. However, the Seamless Sect had multiple supreme artifacts? 3 senior brothers? How many supreme artifacts are there in the artifact hall? Murong Yu looked at Huining Hao and the other 2 in shock. Wu Xinxue smiled. Junior brother, just go and take a look. I believe the supreme artifact's power is useless to you. Murong Yu nodded. His reaction just now was only because he was caught off guard when he entered the artifact hall. Murong Yu's body shook, and he took a step forward and disappeared from the spot. After a while, he arrived at the deepest part of the artifact hall. Moronyu was speechless as he looked at the 3 supreme artifacts that were emitting 5-colored holy light that were thrown on the ground like trash. One of them was a rope-like supreme artifact, while the other was a pitch-black long stick. The last one was a ring-shaped supreme artifact. However, the 3 supreme weapons were casually thrown on the ground like 3 piles of trash. If it was any other sect, or even a sanctuary, they would probably worship the 3 holy artifacts as if they were their ancestors. Perhaps only the Seamless sect would throw them on the ground like trash. At this moment, Hu Yininghao and the other 2 appeared behind Moronyu. However, they only glanced at the 3 supreme artifacts and looked away, as if they didn't care at all. Moronyu couldn't help but feel strange. If a supreme artifact appeared outside, those supremes wouldn't be able to resist the urge to snatch it. Did Lu Xiankai and the others really think so lightly of it? Or was there something wrong with the 3 supreme artifacts? There's nothing wrong with the 3 supreme artifacts. They're perfect supreme artifacts. However, with our strength, not only are we unable to unleash their full power, we might even get ourselves killed. Therefore, we're not interested in them. Hu Yininghao said calmly. Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui nodded. They had the same thought. In fact, there was one thing that they didn't tell Moronyu. That was, as long as one of them broke through to the Supreme Being realm first, he would be able to obtain one of the 3 supreme artifacts. The earlier one broke through, the higher the chance of obtaining the supreme artifact. After all, there were only 3 supreme artifacts. Therefore, junior brother, the fact that you have a supreme artifact must not be leaked. Otherwise, you'll get yourself killed. Lu Xiankai explained with a solemn expression. You can use the items in the artifact hall as you wish. Other than your own use, you can even choose a few good treasures to give to your family. However, you can only have 10 at most. As for your own use, there's no limit to the number. Of course, if you're not afraid of the trouble, you can also take these 3 supreme artifacts. Wu Xinshui pointed at the 3 supreme artifacts and said with a smile. Morongyu's eyes lit up as he looked at the other saint artifacts and magic treasures. Other than these 3 saint artifacts, there were many other saint artifacts and magic treasures of other grades in the artifact hall. There were peerless saint artifacts, holy saint artifacts, ancestral artifacts, and even chaos ancestral artifacts. However, the higher the grade of the saint artifact, the lesser the storage. However, the storage in the artifact hall was enough for Moronyu to advance by a few realms, if he refined all of these saint artifacts. Senior brothers, can I really take these saint artifacts as I wish? Moronyu resisted the temptation to immediately take the saint artifacts and asked. Lu Xiankai and the other 2 nodded immediately. Moronyu immediately smiled. Senior brothers, let's go and take a look at the medicine hall. As he spoke, he left the artifact hall first. Similar to the artifact hall, the medicine hall of the Seamless Society was also larger, but its storage was relatively smaller. After all, Lu Xiankai and the others needed elixirs very much. Naturally, the medicine hall storage was not as abundant. Moronyu went through the book pavilion, artifact hall, medicine hall, and other treasuries. Finally, they arrived at the Seamless Society's floating area. There are countless mountains here, and some of them have thicker spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, there are 17 mountains that have already been occupied by the few of us. You can choose any of the other mountains to build your own palace. Of course, you can choose not to cultivate and go to other mountains to cultivate. You can even leave the Seamless Society. We don't have any mandatory requirements. However, in 10 years, there will be an exchange between the 10 holy lands of the human race. I've heard that you are a monster in refining weapons and elixirs. At that time, you must bring glory to the Seamless Society and trample the other holy lands under your feet. Hu Yininghao's eyes shone brightly as he spoke. He looked a little depressed. It must be because the Seamless Society's results in the exchange between the 10 holy lands over the years weren't very good. Moronyu blushed with shame. He was only at the 2nd level of the undead realm. How could he compare with the disciples of the other holy lands? Chapter 1420. Don't worry, we're competing on quality, not the grade of saint weapons and pills. You just have to maintain your previous level of refining. As for refining pills, it's best if you can achieve a 95% compatibility. I'd like to see how ugly the other sacred lands will be. Huyan Inghao chuckled as he patted Murong Yu's shoulder, causing Murong Yu to grimace in pain. 95% compatibility. Murong Yu rolled his eyes, completely speechless. That was an expert at the level of a pill saint. The saints of the holy world were as numerous as the grains of sand in the Ganges River. There's still 10 years left. We don't have much in the infernal region, but we have plenty of resources. Murong Yu, you just have to practice. You can use the resources as you wish. Murong Yu nodded. In the end, Murong Yu found a mountain with relatively dense heaven and earth yuan qi and built a palace as a place to stay. Huyan Inghao and the other two left. In fact, the heaven and earth yuan qi in the infernal region was indeed dense. It was the ideal place for other saints to cultivate. However, the heaven and earth yuan qi had no effect on Murong Yu. After all, no matter how dense the heaven and earth yuan qi was, it couldn't compare to refining a few saint weapons. Meng Qing and the rest should be at the peak of the great saint realm. With their aptitude, it's entirely possible for them to break through to the undying realm. It's just that it'll take a long time. After all, there are so many talented geniuses in the sacred world, and most of them are stuck at the great saint realm, unable to enter the undying realm. Murong Yu muttered to himself. With a flash, he stepped out and appeared in front of the medicine hall in the infernal region. Murong Yu took out his identity token and used it as a key to open the door of the medicine hall. He entered the medicine hall. His enormous divine sense immediately spread out and covered the entire medicine hall. Then, bottle after bottle of pills entered Murong Yu's vision. Purple Core Chi Pill, Taiji Raging Flame Pill, Shaoyin Earth Origin Demon Pill. There were countless pills in the medicine hall. Moreover, there were notes on each pill's effects, as well as pill formulas and so on. Yes, it's them. A smile appeared on Murong Yu's face. He took a step forward and arrived at a row of shelves not far from the entrance of the Hall of Medicine. There were over 100 types of elixirs on the shelf, and Murong Yu's eyes were fixed on a bottle called Heavenly Immortal Saint Elixir. After consuming this pill, it could increase a person's chances of breaking through from the Great Sage stage to the Undead stage. This was the effect of the Heavenly Immortal Holy Pellet. This was exactly the pill that Murong Yu needed right now. Although Murong Yu had obtained the Heaven Origin Fruit after experiencing life and death, it could also allow a peak Ancestral Sage to break through to the Primal Chaos Ancestral Sage realm. It was not that Murong Yu was reluctant to give the Heaven Origin Fruit to Yu Mengqing and the others. However, there was only one Heaven Origin Fruit, and it could only help one person. If he wanted Mu Liue, Kurlan, Sidu Xian, and the others to break through without favoritism, Murong Yu still needed to find other elixirs. Moreover, it would be too wasteful if the Heaven Origin Fruit only helped them break through to the Undead stage. There are only 2 pills. Murong Yu picked up the bottle of Heavenly Immortal Holy Pellet and looked at it. He found that there were only 2 pills in the bottle. Moreover, the compatibility of these 2 pills was not high. They had only reached a 70% compatibility. The effect should not be strong. Murong Yu only took one of them and placed the last one back in the distance. As far as Murong Yu was concerned, all he needed was the pill formula. That way, he could refine pills with even higher compatibility. However, if he wanted to refine it, he had to obtain the various herbs needed to refine the Heavenly Immortal Holy Pellet. What kind of herbs did he need? He needed the Yin Yang Cauldron to analyze the pill formula. This was because the bottle of Heavenly Immortal Holy Pellet in the Infernal Medicine Hall did not have a prescription. It must be because the level of the pill was too low, and the Infernal Medicine disciples were not interested in it. After throwing the Heavenly Immortal Holy Pellet into the Yin Yang Cauldron and having it analyze the formula, Murong Yu left the Medicine Hall and appeared in the Artifact Hall. Murong Yu did not immediately search for the herbs because the formula had not been analyzed yet. He came to the artifact hall to collect a few peerless saint artifacts to improve his cultivation. When I was in the undead stage, I already needed a large number of peerless saint artifacts to improve my cultivation. Now that I'm in the second level of the undead stage, how many peerless saint artifacts do I need to break through to the third level? Moron Youth thought to himself, but his eyes were looking at the mountain of peerless saint artifacts. To the many disciples of the infernal medicine, peerless saint artifacts were just trash. They were useless. Therefore, the infernal medicine did not lack peerless saint artifacts. However, peerless saint artifacts were not ordinary weapons. They cannot be forged at will. Every time one was refined, there would be one less. Although the infernal medicine's leader, Infernal Medicine, had said that Moron Yu was his last disciple, this did not mean that the infernal medicine would not take in disciples in the future. Once they took in more disciples, the consumption of saint artifacts would increase. In other words, Moron Yu would not be able to devour all of these peerless saint artifacts. Let's see how many saint artifacts I need first. Moron Yu thought for a moment, then reached out and grabbed 20 peerless saint artifacts into the Hichu Luo Shu world. When he was in the 5th level of the undead stage, he needed 20 peerless saint artifact to reach the 6th level of the undead stage. Moron Yu had already tried his best to increase the number. I don't know if 20 is enough. I might as well devour them here. If it's not enough, I'll just take these saint artifacts and refine them. Moron Yu thought to himself and sat down cross-legged. With a thought, the 20 peerless saint artifacts were swallowed into Moron Yu's stomach and appeared in the chaos furnace. The chaotic smelt shook gently, and the 20 supreme grade saint artifacts were refined without any hesitation. They were turned into the most primordial power. The power was like a torrent pouring into Moron Yu's body. As a result, Moron Yu could see his strength steadily increasing. However, Moron Yu soon cried out in surprise and furrowed his brows. After the power of the 20 peerless saint artifacts had entered his body, his strength had stopped increasing in just a short amount of time. Moron Yu's face darkened immediately. If the second level of the undead stage was divided into 10 small stages, then the 20 peerless saint artifacts that Moron Yu had just refined were only enough to raise his cultivation to the second stage. If 20 peerless saint artifacts raised his cultivation by one small stage, then wouldn't he need at least 200 peerless saint artifacts to raise his cultivation to the third level? At this moment, Moron Yu felt a headache coming on. With a thought, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the peerless saint artifacts not far in front of him. This time, 100 peerless saint artifacts were refined by him. 6th level of the undead stage. Sure enough, every 20 peerless saint artifacts only raised his cultivation by one small stage. After refining 100 peerless saint artifacts, Moron Yu's cultivation finally rose to the 6th level of the undead stage. After refining 200 peerless saint artifacts, Moron Yu's cultivation finally broke through to the 3rd level of the undead stage. Thus, Moron Yu stopped cultivating. He had a feeling that if he wanted to raise his cultivation from the 3rd level of the undead stage to the 4th level of the undead stage, he would need at least 400 peerless saint artifacts. At this rate, if he wanted to raise his cultivation from the undead stage to the profound sage stage, he was afraid that refining all the peerless saint artifacts here would not be enough. He could not continue to refine them. Moron Yu felt a little embarrassed. He had just become a disciple of the Infernal Order, and he had used so many peerless saint artifacts without making any contributions. He was not someone who only knew how to ask without knowing how to repay. Moreover, the higher the level of the saint artifacts, the fewer there were. Moron Yu felt that the saint artifacts and treasures in the Infernal Order Artifact Hall could at most allow him to break through to the Ancient Sage stage or the Saint King stage. And that was only after refining those high-grade saint artifacts and magic treasures. Of course, Moron Yu would not do that. The treasury of the Infernal Order had been emptied by him for countless years, and he would not do such a thing. It seems that I can't always stay in the Infernal Order. If I want to improve my strength, I have to go outside and take a look. Moron Yu muttered to himself. His figure flashed, and he disappeared from the artifact hall, appearing in the Hichu Luoshu world. Rainbow wondergrass, golden lion's tooth, sun-beheading orchid. In just a short while, the Yin-Yang Cauldron had already analyzed the prescription of the heaven-piercing immortal holy pill. It required more than 100 medicinal herbs and heaven and earth treasures. These medicinal herbs are not very high grade. I wonder if the Infernal Order's Heaven and Earth Treasures Hall has them. If not, I can only use the Yin-Yang Cauldron to refine them. Murong-Yu is not willing to directly use the Yin-Yang Cauldron to refine pills. Although that way of refining pills did not require various medicinal herbs and heaven and earth treasures, it could not improve Murong-Yu's alchemy level. While talking, Murong-Yu once again entered the medicine hall, found the bottle of heaven-piercing immortal holy pill, and wrote down the prescription that the Yin-Yang Cauldron had analyzed. Then, he came to the Heaven and Earth Treasures Hall. Yes, although these medicinal herbs and heaven and earth treasures are not high grade, they are still alive. Although it's not much, it should be enough to refine a few bottles of heaven-piercing immortal holy pill. After finding enough medicinal herbs in the Heaven and Earth Treasures Hall, Murong-Yu returned to his own hall in the Infernal Order and began to refine pills. One day later, rumble, an incomparably powerful aura suddenly spread out from Murong-Yu's hall. Accompanying, it was a misty, holy light that soared into the sky and an incomparably rich medicinal fragrance. Little junior brother is refining pills? At the same time that the strange phenomenon appeared, the many disciples in the Infernal Order who were still in the Infernal Order were startled awake, and all of them probed with their divine senses. Only 90% compatibility. That's too weak. Murong-Yu looked at the 10 heaven-piercing immortal holy pills in his hand, shook his head, and threw them to the side, continuing to refine pills. However, when the others heard Murong-Yu's voice, their faces darkened. He was not satisfied with pills with 90% compatibility. That was the work of an alchemy grandmaster. Chapter 1421. Third level of the undead stage. Seeing Murong-Yu throw away the bottle of heavenly immortal elixir with a 90% compatibility as if it were trash, Huyin Hao and the others, who were still in the never-ending infernal region, were shocked. However, they soon discovered that Murong-Yu's cultivation level had increased by a small level. This speed, Huyin Hao and the others were shocked. However, in addition to being shocked, they were also secretly happy. Because they were all monstrous geniuses, their cultivation speed was not slow. They had always felt lonely at the top. However, if Murong-Yu were to surpass them, they'd be able to experience the feeling of defeat. Regardless of the shock of Lu Xiankai and the others, Murong-Yu continued to refine pills. At the rate of 1 bottle per day, he continued to refine pills for 10 consecutive days. During these 10 days, the mountain peak where Murong-Yu was always enveloped by bursts of heaven and earth vision. Bursts of incomparably rich pill fragrance lingered for a long time. Every pill has a halo that has at least a 90% compatibility. However, I wonder if there are any pills that have a 95% compatibility? During these few days, Huyin Hao and the others had not cultivated. Instead, they had been constantly observing Murong-Yu. However, they only knew the approximate compatibility of Murong-Yu's pills from the halo of the pills. This was because they did not dare to use their divine consciousness to probe Murong-Yu's main hall, because that might affect Murong-Yu. Therefore, they could not see the specific compatibility of these pills. I still can't reach a 95% compatibility. After refining 10 bottles of heavenly immortal elixir in a row, Murong-Yu stopped refining pills because the relevant medicinal materials were used up. However, it's not that easy to become a pill saint. As long as I become stronger, I will eventually become a pill saint who can refine pills with a 95% compatibility. Now it's time to leave. After choosing a few supreme quality saint artifacts for Yu Mengqing and the others from the artifact hall, Morongyu left through the Hichu Luoshu and appeared in Heavenly Crow City. Heavenly Crow City was the place where Yu Mengqing and the other girls temporarily lived before Morongyu went to join the true martial temple. What's going on? Morongyu's face darkened as soon as he appeared outside Yu Mengqing's manor, because at this moment, a large group of people had surrounded his manor. There were saints, great saints, and even undead realm experts. With a gloomy expression, Morongyu's spiritual sense immediately spread out. After discovering that Yu Mengqing was not missing and was not injured, he finally calmed down. However, he still couldn't figure out what was going on. Inside the manor, Yu Mengqing, Mu Liue, Sidu Xian, Kurlan, Gongsun Ningyu, and the others were furious. However, they didn't dare to voice their anger. They didn't even dare to leave the manor. This was because they had already activated the manor's formation and firmly enveloped the entire manor. Even if there were undying saints outside, they wouldn't be able to break the formation in a short time. However, if this continued, the formation and restriction will be broken sooner or later. Let's ask Morongyu for help. Situ Xian looked at Yu Mengqing, Mu Liue, and Kurlan with a gloomy expression and said, "No." Yu Mengqing and Mu Liue immediately refused. Murong is powerful, but he's in the true martial temple. We can't implicate him in everything. Moreover, there are people behind these bastards. Even if Murong comes back, I'm afraid it won't help. Yu Mengqing said coldly, her eyes flashing with murderous intent. Mu Liue nodded and said, "We've always lived under Murong's wings. No matter how big or small the matter is, he has to step in. As his wife, we can't just be a vase. We have to deal with these small matters ourselves. However, we haven't even reached the undying realm. How can we be a match for them? Are we just going to sit here and wait for our deaths?" Kurlan couldn't help but say with some annoyance, "Hold on a little longer. If it still doesn't work, we'll have to inform Murong." These bastards want us to be their wives? What wishful thinking. Yu Mengqing sneered. Brother, what's wrong with these people? Why are they surrounding that manor so fiercely? Is there a treasure in that manor? After knowing that Yu Mengqing and the others were fine for the time being, Morongyu was no longer anxious. Therefore, he found someone behind him and asked, "Are you an outsider?" The person who was asked looked at Morongyu with a strange expression and said in a low voice, "Those people are from the star-pointing stockade. They're very powerful." Morongyu expressed his doubts. The person continued to explain, "There aren't any treasures in that manor. However, there are a few beauties who moved in not long ago. I don't know when they were discovered by the leader of the star-pointing stockade. Now, the star-pointing king wants to take them as his wives. However, those beauties are very stubborn. Although they aren't strong, they would rather die than submit. They are confronting the star-pointing stockade. However, I think they won't be able to hold on for long." He wanted to take his wife as the mistress of the fort? A cold, killing intent flashed across Morongyu's eyes. He sneered in his heart. These star-pointing stockade people are openly doing evil in Heavenly Crow City. Isn't the City Lord Mansion of Heavenly Crow City going to show up to deter them? The person's expression changed slightly. He looked around, and after making sure that there was no one around, he set up a soundproof restriction between the two of them. Then, he lowered his voice and said, "The star-pointing stockade's star-pointing king is the brother of our city lord. Therefore, when the star-pointing stockade people are domineering in Heavenly Crow City, we don't dare to say anything. So that's why Morongyu is furious. This city lord of Heavenly Crow City was definitely not a good person. They actually dared to have designs on his women. These people must be tired of living. Brother, if someone helps Heavenly Crow City get rid of this scourge, what will you do?" "We will be very happy and grateful to him." "AI, brother, what are you doing?" Before this person finished speaking, he saw Morongyu turn around and walk towards the star-pointing stockade people. Thus, he hastily took a few steps forward and grabbed Morongyu, getting rid of scourges for the people. Morongyu revealed a smile. However, it was a little cold. "Brother, don't be rash. I heard that their star-pointing king is at the imperishable stage. You are no match for him. You are just sending yourself to death." This person was relatively kind-hearted as he hurriedly advised Morongyu. Morongyu turned to look at this person and smiled. "You are not bad. After today, come and find me. I will give you a great opportunity." With that, Morongyu no longer cared about this person and turned around to leave. "Stop. If you take another step forward, I will kill you without mercy." Seeing Morongyu striding over a few of the star-pointing stockades, underlings roared and blocked in front of Morongyu with murderous intent. "Scram! Otherwise die." Morongyu was never a soft-hearted person. These people had designs on his women, and he had already sentenced them to death. "You are courting death." The underlings were enraged. With a loud roar, they attacked together and attacked Morongyu. "It's over." Seeing Morongyu being attacked, the person who spoke to Morongyu before could not bear to watch anymore. This was because Morongyu was only at the Great Saint Realm, and the people who attacked him were also at the Great Saint Realm. However, what shocked him the most was that Morongyu hadn't been killed. On the contrary, those underlings were sent flying by Morongyu's palm. Puff! They spat out blood and flew out like kites with broken strings. Before they landed on the ground, their life aura had completely dissipated. Clearly, he was deader than dead. "Kill him." Seeing this scene, the people from the star-pointing stockade were stunned. They were the overlords of this area. Who dared to kill them? Even if they wanted to kill them, they would do it in a place where no one was around. Now, in front of hundreds of people from the star-pointing stockade, one of their men was killed in public. This person was simply too audacious. After a roar, more than a dozen people from the star-pointing stockade attacked at the same time. For a moment, countless terrifying forces tore toward Morongyu like a torrent, trying to kill him. Morongyu sneered. He used his right hand like a sword and slashed out. Puff! With just a sound, the saints and great saints of the star-pointing stockade were cut into two by Morongyu. However, Morongyu did not stop. He was still striding toward the entrance of the manor. At this moment, the undead realm experts from the star-pointing stockade finally realized how powerful Morongyu was. A shadow flashed before Morongyu's eyes as three silhouettes appeared in front of him, blocking his path. "Who are you? How dare you kill the people from the star-pointing stockade?" A middle-aged man with a scar on his face and a shiny head shouted at Morongyu with a murderous aura. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion towards Morongyu. "You're overestimating yourself." Morongyu sneered and pointed at the bald man's hand. At this moment, the middle-aged man's body trembled as if he was struck by the tribulation thunder. Before he could react, his large hand exploded with a bang and turned into a cloud of blood mist. With a thought, he wanted to retreat with a horrified look on his face. However, just as he took a step forward, a loud bang resounded in his ears. At this moment, the surrounding people saw the bald man's body explode with a bang and turned into a cloud of blood mist that drifted in the void. Shock. Astonishment. Everyone who saw this scene was shocked. This was because Morongyu was audacious and Morongyu was powerful. Chapter 1422. Thump, thump, thump. The remaining two undead stage expert from the star-picking stockade took a dozen steps back immediately. They looked at Morongyu in horror. Whoosh! An instant later, one of the undead realm experts abruptly turned around, took a step forward, and soared into the sky, turning into a stream of light and fleeing without a trace. "Where do you think you're going?" Morongyu sneered. He continued to form a sword with his right hand and slashed out swiftly. Suddenly, a shocking sword ray tore through the void, crossed the endless time and space, and appeared behind the man in an instant. Poof! The undead realm expert was cut into two by the sword light. When the sword ray cut his body, the soul power contained in the sword ray rushed into the man's soul space like a sharp sword and slashed his soul directly. The man's soul did not even have time to react before it was shredded into billions of pieces by Morongyu's soul power. Even someone like Morongyu, who had a 3-star soul, would find it difficult to recover after his soul was shredded into billions of pieces, let alone an ordinary saint. His soul was shredded into billions of pieces, and he died immediately. He could not be more dead. Whoosh! The people from the star-picking stockade were almost scared to death. How could they dare to surround the manor? Each and every one of them tried to escape from this place. The strongest among them was only a great saint. Even an undead stage expert was killed by Murong-yu with a single finger, let alone them. Murong-yu did not care about this and did not stop them from escaping, because he had already done what he wanted to do. Killing 2 undead stage experts in a row had intimidated them. He had made a show of strength and killed the chicken to warn the monkey. Moreover, the star-picking stockade's master and the Heavenly Crow City's master dared to have designs on his women. Murong-yu had already sentenced them to death in his heart. However, Murong-yu was too lazy to look for them, because he knew that these 2 people would soon come to his door. In just a breath's time, the people who had surrounded the manor had all left. Then, Murong-yu took a step forward and entered the manor in a flash. Seeing this scene, the people who were watching the show outside the manor were shocked. In particular, the person whom Murong-yu had asked before was even more surprised. Although this person is powerful enough to kill undead realm experts, he is still very powerful. However, the chief of the star-pointing stockade was an imperishable stage expert. How can he be a match for him? They still haven't escaped. Could it be that he had the ability to deal with the star-pointing fort's chief? Or do you not care about him at all? Everyone was guessing in their hearts. Not only did they not leave, but more and more people gathered. This was because they knew that the star-pointing fort's fort master and the Heavenly Crow City Lord would soon arrive. What should we do? He is definitely not a match for the chief of the star-picking fort. The man who was questioned by Murong-yu earlier looked anxious and wanted to go in to inform Murong-yu. However, they were unable to enter and could only wait anxiously outside. Moreover, he did not dare to overdo it. Once he was discovered by the people of the star-pointing stockade, he would die without a burial place. Hooligan, you're back? Pervert, you're finally back. Although everything that had happened outside had happened in the blink of an eye. However, Yu Mengqing and the rest who had been paying attention to the outside had already known about it. Therefore, the moment Murong-yu appeared outside the manor, Yu Mengqing and the rest flew out and threw themselves into Murong-yu's arms. These beauties can't all be his wives, right? Everyone who saw this scene felt a little uncomfortable in their hearts. That was because Yu Mengqing and the rest were too beautiful. Among the many men present, there was almost no one who hadn't had any ideas about them. However, they only fantasized about it in their hearts and did not dare to do it seriously like the chief of the star-pointing stockade. However, when they saw Murong-yu hugging Yu Mengqing and the others, they still felt uncomfortable in their hearts. Let's go in first. Murong-yu smiled and entered the hall with the girls. After Murong-yu boldly sat down on the main seat in the hall, his face turned gloomy. His gaze was somewhat frightening as he looked at the girls. Why didn't you contact me when you encountered such trouble? Yu Mengqing and the other girls looked at each other, and Yu Mengqing said, we just didn't want you to do everything. We didn't want to be a vase and burden you. Murong-yu felt a warmth in his heart and knew that the girls were thinking for him. However, no one said that you're vases. In the God world and the immortal world, you've managed Shenzhen very well for me. If you were vases, you wouldn't have been able to do so. Now that you're on a higher stage, you're feeling this way because you're not strong enough. However, how long has it been since you ascended to the holy world? All of you have reached the pinnacle of the great sage realm. Do you know how many people in the holy world are unable to reach the great sage realm? How long do those people need to reach the pinnacle of the great sage realm? The time taken for you to reach the great sage realm is less than 1/1000th of the time taken for most people. As long as you're given enough time, you'll become even stronger. Therefore, don't belittle yourselves and think that you're just vases. You don't want trouble, but you still have to do what you can. What if something happens to any of you? How can I live with myself? Yu Mengqing and the other girls lowered their heads and felt a little guilty. In fact, it wasn't that they hadn't thought of this problem, but all right, I'm not blaming you. However, I don't want something like this to happen in the future. I'm your husband, your man. It's my responsibility to protect you. We won't do this in the future. Yu Mengqing, Mu Liue, Kurlan, and Sidu Xian looked at Murong Yu with touched expressions. Their eyes were filled with affection. Big hooligan, we don't want to do this. It's too hard for you to fight alone outside. We want to help you. It's just that our strength is really too low, so we can't help you. Sister Jiqing may be strong, but she's in the Phoenix clan. We don't want to see you suffer too much alone. Yu Mengqing looked at Murong Yu and hesitated for a long time before speaking. As long as you're all well, I won't suffer. Moreover, I brought you the heavenly immortality pill this time. It can help you quickly improve your cultivation and reach the immortality realm. Really? The four girls cheered immediately. Although they were at the peak of the Great Sage realm, they still had a limit to their lifespans. Which cultivator didn't want to be truly immortal? Especially as beauties, the immortality realm not only granted immortality, but also eternal youth. As a woman, what she cared about the most was her appearance. Murong Yu nodded. The four of you and Ningyu are at the peak of the Great Sage realm. The heavenly immortality pill should be able to help you enter the immortality realm. Without further ado, you can improve your cultivation now. As he spoke, Murong Yu summoned the Hichu Luoshu and kept the four girls inside. At the same time, he took a step forward and disappeared from the hall. On the other side, Gong Sun Ning Yu was also dragged into the Hichu Luoshu. As for Old Man Wen, this guy was already at the peak of the immortality realm. Murong Yu hadn't found any pills that could help him break through to the immortality realm. Therefore, he could only temporarily not help him. Anyway, as long as the holy realm was not destroyed, Old Man Wen would not die of old age. Time acceleration. After everyone entered the Hichu Luoshu, Murong Yu began to burn his Chaos Saint vein to accelerate time. Then, Murong Yu gave each of the five girls a bottle of the heavenly immortality pill and a large number of saint veins. The girls began to break through to the next realm. The heavenly immortality pill could not directly help a peak supreme saint to break through to the immortality realm. It only increased the chances of breaking through. Otherwise, Murong Yu would not have given them so many heavenly immortality pills. As one's strength increased, there would be fewer and fewer pills that could directly increase one's cultivation level. At most, it could only increase the chances of breaking through like the heavenly immortality pill. Therefore, a fruit like the heavenly origin fruit that could directly increase one's cultivation level was worth the green thundersect's full strength. Rumble, the girls' aptitudes were not bad. Although they were not as good as Murong Yu, they were still extremely monstrous. Half a month after swallowing the heavenly immortality pill, Mu Liue was the first to break through to the immortality realm. After Mu Liue, it was Yu Mengqing, then Kurlan, Gong Sun Ningyu, and finally Situ Xian. This was because although Situ Xian's aptitude was not inferior to the other girls, however, she was a divine doctor when she was in the desolate world. She had been studying medicine and did not pursue cultivation. Therefore, she was the last to break through. Phew, after the breakthrough, although everyone was happy, they did not get carried away. Instead, they continued to consolidate their cultivation level. However, they could no longer continue to break through. They were not Murong Yu, who could continue to break through as long as he had the strength. Among them, Yu Mengqing was the strongest. She had reached the peak of the first level immortality realm in one go. The other girls were relatively weaker. However, this was enough to make them and Murong Yu very satisfied. At least, they were all in the immortality realm and had become immortals. How many years has it been? From a mortal to a great saint, and now, I'm finally immortal. Yu Mengqing stood up, her face full of excitement. Finally, she looked at Murong Yu with tears in her eyes. Big Rogue, thank you. Yu Mengqing flew into Murong Yu's arms and pressed her lips against Murong Yu's as she spoke. This is what I should do. Moronu chuckled as he took the initiative to ask for more. His large hands had already climbed up to Yu Mengqing's chest and began to knead and pinch as he pleased. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.